Chapter 628. The West Kunlun Heavenly Gate had existed in Jianghu for countless years. Since the great calamity of ancient times, the Heavenly Gate had always existed, but it was very mysterious, extremely powerful and mysterious. When everyone heard the songs of Jianghu, they would hear the names of the East and West heavens, but in reality, only a handful of people had seen them. Their strength still existed in legends. In the Wind-Sweeping Tower's Dragon and Tiger Storm Supreme List, some of the rankings on the Supreme List had not changed for hundreds of years. For example, the first and second positions were reserved for Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. Before the corpses of these two people were found, even after 1,000 years, these two positions would not change. And now, the person ranked third on the Supreme List was the East Sea Lord of the Unrestrained Sky, Zhong Shunxiu. He alone supported the top power in Jianghu. There were only a handful of people in Jianghu who had come into contact with Zhong Shunxiu. Even the Wind-Sweeping Tower did not know what Zhong Shunxiu looked like or how strong he was. Everything about Zhong Shunxiu only existed in legends. It was said that Zhong Shunxiu had once played chess with the previous abbot of Sabodhi Monastery, the divine monk Abhikala, under the Bodhi tree. He won 100 years of Abhikala's life, causing Abhikala to give up the position of abbot the next day and pass away on the third day. It was said that Zhong Shunxiu had come to Hidden Sword Villa to borrow swords to play with, causing several divine weapons to recognize him as their master, but they were all abandoned by Zhong Shunxiu. It was said that Zhong Shunxiu had crossed paths with the moon-worshipping sect leader, Yi Xiaonan. They did not even exchange a single move before Yi Xiaonan took the initiative to admit defeat. He went into seclusion for decades to comprehend the Heaven-Mending Heart Sutra. He vowed not to come out until he had mastered it. The most recent news about Zhong Shunxiu was from decades ago. The other protagonist was the sect leader of Heaven Gate, Jun Wuxian, who was ranked fourth on the Supreme List. The two of them had a great battle on the East Sea. It was said that the sky fell and the earth cracked. The result was that Jun Wuxian was seriously injured and did not take a step out of Heaven Gate for decades. These two were now legendary figures in Jianghu. Although Zhong Shunxiu was ranked third on the Supreme List, he was actually the first in the world. And Jun Wuxian, who was still in seclusion in West Kunlun, was the second in the world. Guan Siyu never expected that Chu Kuanga's death back then would be related to the Heavenly Gates. However, in reality, Chu Kuanga shouldn't have any interactions with the Heavenly Gates. Heaven Gate was an extremely mysterious sect. No one knew its origins. It was as if it was the Sweeping Sky sect, but because of it, Wind-Sweeping Tower did not dare to include its details. Moreover, there were very few people in the Sky Gates. Apart from the Sky Gates sect leader, there were also 9 divine generals. It was said that although the 9 divine generals rarely took action, each of them had the ability to be ranked in the top 20 on the Wind Cloud list. However, due to special reasons, Wind-Sweeping Tower did not dare to include their backgrounds in the Wind Cloud list. Other than these 9 godly generals, there were less than 100 people in the entire Heaven Gates. However, their disciples were all extremely talented, and only 1 in 10,000 had the qualifications to be accepted as a disciple by the Heaven Gates. Over the years, Heaven Gate spent 99% of its time in the West Kunlun mountain range. They rarely stepped out of Jianghu. Even if they did, they were alone or with a few people. There was almost no time when all of them went out. No one knew what Heaven Gate's purpose was, and no one knew what Heaven Gate wanted. Anyway, Heaven Gate had been strong for so many years and had never declined. Even when Kunlun Devil Cult was at its strongest, they could not completely drive Heaven Gate out of West Kunlun and dominate the Kunlun mountain range. Although the West Kunlun mountain range was very big and could accommodate dozens of other forces, let alone the Kunlun Demon Cult and the Heavenly Gate at the same time, how could they allow others to sleep beside their beds? With the power and influence of the Kunlun Demon Cult back then, they were unable to monopolize the Kunlun mountain range and still had to face the Heavenly Gate across the mountains. From this point, one could see the strength of the Heavenly Gate. If Divine Lord Luo, one of the 9 heavenly generals of Heaven Gate, took action, he indeed had the strength to kill Chu Kuanga. He also had the qualifications to not be afraid of trouble. Moreover, they could not see through the martial arts techniques of Heaven Gate. However, Guan Siyu could not understand why the people of Heaven Gate wanted to kill Chu Kuanga. Guan Siyu looked at Yang Gongdu and said coldly, Heaven Gate obviously has no relationship with Lord Chu Kuanga. Why do they want to kill Lord Chu Kuanga? Yang Gongdu, you are anxious to get away. There is a limit to the nonsense you can fabricate. Chu Xiao secretly recovered his vital energy and quietly moved backward. He was also very curious about this matter. At such a critical moment of life and death, Yang Gongdu would not dare to lie to deceive Guan Xiyu. However, things had already reached this point. Whether it was true or not was no longer important. The most important thing was to find a way to get away. Yang Gongdu quickly said, "Why would I make up such a bizarre thing to deceive you at such a time?" Back then, the battle happened in Eastern Qi. Although there were very few witnesses, others did not know. Such a big thing happened in Eastern Qi. How could Eastern Qi not know? However, because one of them was a divine general of Heaven Gate and the other was Chu Kuanga, this matter was not publicized. Instead, it was recorded in a secret book of Eastern Qi and was accidentally discovered by me. Divine Lord Luo of Heaven Gate seemed to want something. He even did not hesitate to kill a force, but was stopped by Chu Kuanga. In the end, the two sides fought fiercely. Divine Lord Luo should not have obtained that thing. Moreover, Divine Lord Luo was also seriously injured. It seemed that due to the rules of Heaven Gate, he had to return to Heaven Gate on time, so he could only let Chu Kuanga leave on the verge of death. Furthermore, I've also analyzed the pattern of when the divine generals of the Elysium leave the Elysium. If I'm not wrong, Divine Lord Luo from the Elysium will leave the Kunlun Mountain soon. He will definitely go to the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall to ask for that item again. Hall Leader Guan, let me go this time. I am willing to mediate between you and Heaven Gate and end this matter once and for all. Although Heaven Gate is powerful, behind me stands the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Heaven Gate will give me face. In fact, Yang Gongdu already knew about this matter. He was also curious about the thing that Chu Kuanga had snatched from Divine Lord Luo of Heaven Gate. However, even an idiot could guess that the thing that could make the 9 great divine generals of Heaven Gate fight for it must not be an ordinary thing. Guan Xiyu frowned. Too many things had happened today, some of which were beyond her expectations. She did not expect that in the end, the legendary Heaven Gate would appear. At this moment, a low and hoarse voice suddenly came from outside. Give face to Eastern Qi? Our Heaven Gate does not need to give face to anyone. Even if the old emperor of Eastern Qi comes, it will be the same. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a strangely dressed guy standing outside. He was dressed in black and had a black armor carved with dragon patterns on his upper body. He was neither handsome nor ugly. He looked like an ordinary middle-aged man. However, the right side of his face was carved with a strange dragon pattern, which was exactly the same as the dragon pattern on his black armor. It made him look a little strange. Everyone present had been fighting for a long time, but even Guan Xiyu did not notice when this person had arrived. Divine Lord Luo. Yang Gongdu's eyes widened as he uttered the name. Even Yang Gongdu himself did not expect that Divine Lord Luo would actually come. Wasn't his mouth a little too clever? Looking at the formation rising outside the courtyard, Divine Lord Luo grinned. It was a disdainful smile. He stretched out his finger and gently tapped the formation. A strange halo rippled out. He tapped it again, and the halo rippled faster and more intensely. Finally, with a loud bang, the protective formation of the Guanzhong torture room was instantly shattered. True Fire Spiritual Cultivation Realm. Divine Lord Luo from the Sky Gates was actually an expert in the True Fire Spiritual Cultivation Realm. Chu Xiao suddenly thought of something. He quickly gathered his strength and moved backward silently. He gave Mei Qinglian, who was trapped in the formation plate, a look. It was only then that Chu Xiao suddenly understood the reason for the drastic change in the Guanzhong torture room in the original plot. Previously, Chu Xiao had always thought that the huge change in the Guanzhong torture room in the original plot was caused by Mei Qinglian's plot to seize the Guanzhong torture room. However, it seemed that the saint was a little too naive. She thought that she was fooling others, but she did not expect that Guan Xiyu had seen everything. Now that there was Chu Xiao, Guan Xiyu could rely on her own strength to completely stabilize the situation. If there was no Chu Xiao, Yang Gongdu would have faced Guan Xiyu head-on. Yang Gongdu reckoned that he would have died 8 times over. The one who caused the huge change in the Guanzhong torture room should be Divine Lord Luo from the Sky Gates. Even if Chu Xiao's appearance created a butterfly effect, it obviously could not affect a force of the level of the Sky Gates. Divine Lord Luo walked over, and the entire place suddenly fell into silence. When he walked up to Yang Gongdu, Divine Lord Luo suddenly said, You are very annoying. I hate people like you who obviously have no strength but still jump up and down. I heard that you were chased out of West Chu because you offended the Celestial Master Mansion and the moon-worshipping cult at the same time. What the hell are Zhang Daoling and Dong Huang Tai doing? They actually allowed a person like you to leave West Chu alive. And what I hate the most is that you actually dared to secretly investigate the Sky Gates. You don't know what you're doing. As soon as Divine Lord Luo's voice fell, Yang Gongdu instantly felt that something was wrong. He was good at observing people's hearts. At that moment, the extreme fear in his heart seemed to have overflowed, and Yang Gongdu subconsciously wanted to escape. However, before he could move, Divine Lord Luo had already slapped him. Yang Gongdu looked horrified as he shouted, "I am Eastern Qi." However, before he could finish his sentence, his body exploded into a cloud of blood mist with a loud bang. No one understood how Divine Lord Luo had attacked. It was just a simple slap across the air, and Yang Gongdu instantly disappeared without a trace. Chapter 629. No one had expected Sir God Luo to strike so decisively and kill Yang Gongdu with a single slap. Moreover, the reason was simply because he did not like Yang Gongdu. Just like what Divine Lord Luo had said, even if the Emperor of Eastern Qi came, the Elysium Gate would not give him face, let alone Yang Gongdu. For so many years, the Elysium Gate seemed to be isolated from the world. Most of the time, they stayed on West Kunlun Mountain. They did not invade other people's territory. They only guarded their own territory, so they were naturally not afraid of anyone. The court and Jianghu were always in opposition, but they also cooperated with each other. In Eastern Qi, even the Chunyang Dao sect and the real martial arts cult had to give the Eastern Qi imperial court some face, but the Elysium Gate did not need to. If you have the ability, you can send troops to bypass West Chu and enter the wasteland of the far west. Then, you can go up to Kunlun Mountain to attack the Elysium Gate. Even when the Kunlun Devil cult was at its peak, they could not chase the Elysium Gate down from Kunlun Mountain, let alone the Eastern Qi imperial court. But Yang Gongdu's death was very ironic. He had been scheming all his life. Although most of them ended in failure, at least the momentum was not weak. Moreover, he had turned danger into safety many times. He had been courting death for so long, but nothing had really happened. So, Yang Gongdu felt that he was just unlucky, and it was not his problem. Until he died, Yang Gongdu finally understood that without strength, no matter how strong the scheme was, it would be useless. People like Sir God Luo wouldn't even give him a chance to speak. Unfortunately, when Yang Gongdu really understood this, it was already too late. Divine Lord Luo, who had killed Yang Gongdu like a fly, turned to look at Guan Siyu. He said calmly, "You are the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room?" Although that guy just now was very annoying, he was able to reconstruct what had happened back then. He was right. I'm here to take something back, something that belongs to me in the first place. You don't have to worry that I will take my anger out on you because of what happened to Chu Kuanga in the past. Although Chu Kuanga is a little stubborn, his strength is really not weak. He dared to fight me head-on before he reached the true fire spirit refinement realm. He actually fought to the point where both of us were injured, forcing me to return to the heavenly gates to recuperate for several years before I recovered. Of course, that fellow is also a little foolish. Is it worth it to throw away his life for a small clan that doesn't know what's good for them? Hearing this, everyone present was shocked. Previously, they thought that when Chu Kuanga fought with Divine Lord Luo had not yet reached the true fire spiritual refinement realm. It turned out that he had become an expert of the true fire spiritual refinement realm in just a few decades. Chu Kuanga was actually able to skip levels and fight with him, and both of them were injured. His strength was beyond their imagination. Guan Siyu's expression did not change. He only said in a deep voice, "I wonder what exactly the Heavenly Gate wants?" Before Chu Kuanga died, he did not leave anything behind. Although Guan Siyu was Chu Kuanga's heir, he was not Chu Kuanga. In the past, Chu Kuanga had fought with Sir God Luo just because Sir God Luo wanted to kill him and steal his treasure. In the eyes of many people, it was not worth it. However, in Chu Kuanga's eyes, human life was more important than heaven. It was worth it to exchange his life for the lives of dozens of people. However, to Guan Siyu, it was obviously not worth it. The power that Divine Lord Luo had displayed was almost overwhelming. Although Divine Lord Luo had said that he would not vent his anger on the Guanzhong torture room, Judging from the way he had killed Yang Gongdu with one slap, it was obvious that Divine Lord Luo was a domineering person who believed that those who obeyed him would prosper and those who opposed him would perish. If he didn't hand over the item, it was hard to say what Sir God Luo would do. However, Guan Xiyu really did not know what Divine Lord Luo wanted. What could he give? Before Chu Kuanga died, he was not the only one at the scene. There were so many people watching. Chu Kuanga really did not leave anything for them. Unexpectedly, when Divine Lord Luo heard what Guan Xiyu said, he did not get angry. He only nodded thoughtfully and said, "That's right. Even Chu Kuanga himself should not know what that item is used for. He is really a fool. He snatched something from me, but he did not know what he snatched. Did he really do it for the lives of those trash idiots?" After mumbling, Divine Lord Luo waved his hand and said, "It's okay if you don't know. I will look for it myself. Where is Chu Kuanga's body buried? Take out his funerary items and the space secret box and see if they are there." Upon hearing that, the expressions of all the warriors who belonged to the Guanzhong torture room changed. There were even some old people from the Guanzhong torture room who wanted to rush forward and scold Divine Lord Luo without any regard for their lives. Divine Lord Luo actually wanted to dig up Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. This was simply a humiliation to the Guanzhong torture room. It was something that they absolutely could not tolerate. If one was not an old person from the Guanzhong torture room, one would not understand the prestige and status of Chu Kuanga in the Guanzhong torture room in the past. He was definitely an existence that was like a religion. If Guan Xiyu relied on the law to maintain the Guanzhong torture room, then Chu Kuanga relied on his personal charm. In the eyes of the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room during that period, Chu Kuanga was absolutely a godlike existence that could not be insulted or blasphemed by anyone. Hence, before Chu Kuanga died, he abruptly chose to let Guan Xiyu take over the position of Hall Master. Although there were many people who were dissatisfied and did not understand, they still chose to listen to Chu Kuanga and approve of Guan Xiyu taking over the position of Hall Master. Otherwise, Guan Xiyu's position as Hall Master would not be stable. At that moment, Divine Lord Luo actually said that he wanted to dig up Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. To most of the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room, this was simply intolerable. Guan Xiyu's expression also changed. He said in a deep voice, "Lord Chu Kuanga has already been laid to rest. No one can disturb him, not even the Elysium. The Guanzhong torture room has no intention of becoming enemies with the Elysium. If the Elysium wants something, I can try my best to help you find it. However, insulting Lord Chu Kuanga is equivalent to insulting the Guanzhong torture room. The Guanzhong torture room absolutely cannot tolerate this." To Guan Xiyu, there were two most important people and one most important thing in his life. The most important thing was to develop the Guanzhong torture room. At least when he stepped down as Hall Master, he could confidently say that he did not let down the Guanzhong torture room's nurturing. As for the two people, one of them was naturally Mei Qinglian, and the other was Chu Kuanga. Guan Xiyu had joined the Guanzhong torture room when he was young. From then on, he had regarded Chu Kuanga as his idol and his guide. Although he was not Chu Kuanga's disciple, when he was in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Kuanga had taught him a lot of things without hiding anything. It could be said that Chu Kuanga was also a teacher and a father to him. All these years, he had worked conscientiously and painstakingly to develop the Guanzhong torture room to such an extent. A large part of the reason was that he did not want to let down Chu Kuanga's expectations in the past. Since Chu Kuanga had handed the position to him before he died, if he could not do it, how could he face Lord Chu Kuanga in the underworld? And now, there were people who wanted to touch Lord Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. This was something that Guan Xiyu could not accept. After taking a deep look at Guan Xiyu, Divine Lord Luo looked at the other old people in the Guanzhong torture room who were furious and even dared to glare at him. A true fire refinement realm expert. He could not help but shake his head and said, "Strange, this is really strange. You all know my abilities, so why are you still resisting? Aren't you afraid of death? Or do you really think that I am easy to talk to? You are just a dead person. His body has died and his Tao has disappeared. Other than his bones, everything else is gone. Why are you so stubborn? Do you know that you will die if you do this?" The last word "die" seemed to be said casually, but everyone present could not help but feel a chill from the bottom of their hearts. It was not a murderous intent, but a kind of contempt. In Divine Lord Luo's eyes, the people present were like ants that he could casually trample to death. It was just that he was finally able to leave the heavenly gates again, so he was in a good mood. He said a few more words to these ants. As long as they knew what was good for them, he could let them live. But why couldn't these ants see it clearly? Why did they use their lives to resist for something that was not important to him? Divine Lord Luo did not understand, just like how he did not understand why Chu Kuanga would fight him to the death for the lives of a bunch of ants. So now, Divine Lord Luo was a little angry. Guan Siyu let out a long breath and said in a low voice, "Because there are some things that must be protected, even if it means death." Lord Chu Kuanga represents the last dignity of the Guanzhong torture room. No one can blaspheme it, not even the heavenly gates. Divine Lord Luo shook his head and said, "Stubborn and troublesome. Why can't you let me save some energy?" As soon as he finished speaking, Guan Siyu suddenly felt an extremely dangerous aura. He formed a seal with his hand and the surrounding chi of heaven and earth began to spin wildly like the eye of the sea, gathering into a huge vortex of gang chi. He used stirring the sea, but he did not attack Divine Lord Luo. Instead, he used it to block in front of him. The next moment, an invisible force had already struck him. It was as if an invisible hand had clenched tightly in front of him. In an instant, the chi vortex suddenly collapsed. Guan Siyu's famous magical power, 9 transformations, was inexplicably broken in an instant. Divine Lord Luo's face revealed a look of disappointment. He said, "Weak, very weak. You are much weaker than Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga stopped me because he has the strength. You are so weak, why do you want to stop me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Divine Lord Luo used his palm as a knife and slashed in the air. However, the next moment, the endless chi of Gang Chi in the void condensed and transformed into an invisible blade that fell. Guan Siyu could not see anything, but in his perception, the world seemed to have turned into a hell of blades. Sharp murderous intent was everywhere. Chapter 630. Chu Xiao had seen a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse fight before. On floating Jade Mountain, several true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouses from the righteous and demonic sects fought. The fight was earth-shattering, and the entire floating Jade Mountain was almost shattered. However, Chu Xiao had never seen a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse like Divine Lord Luo. Even Guan Siyu had never seen one before. His attacks were invisible, but they were real. It was mysterious and strange, and it was impossible to figure out. However, Chu Xiao had a certain degree of confidence. After his strength rose to a certain realm, he could use heaven's sun gazing at air to see through this wonderful change. Of course, Chu Xiao had to wait until he reached a certain realm, at least a martial Dao Grand Master. In the boundless blade hell, Guan Siyu's majestic Gang Chi suddenly erupted. A divine shadow shrouded her body and kept growing, resisting the invisible blades. This was the strongest move of Guan Siyu's divine 9 transformations, God's descent. However, this God was an illusory existence. It was not passed down in any legend, but forever existed in Guan Siyu's heart. Ha ha! Divine Lord Luo chuckled. He took a step forward and punched. A thunderous sonic boom suddenly rang out in the air. The divine figure that was constantly expanding started to crumble in an incomparably fragile manner. The divine light faded, and Guan Siyu's figure retreated step by step. Blood flowed uncontrollably from her mouth. On the ground where Guan Siyu was standing, there was a huge fist mark. It was several feet deep into the ground, and it was extremely terrifying. Divine Lord Luo shook his head and said, "You're a little stronger than I thought, but only a little. You can't compare to Chu Kuanga at all. You've seen my strength. It's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. I don't have much time, so don't waste my time here. Open Chu Kuanga's mausoleum. If you don't die, I'll save energy." Guan Siyu looked deeply at Mei Qinglian, and there was a complicated look in her eyes. She was the only woman he had ever loved in his life. He had never thought that this time, because of this unforeseen event, it would become an eternal farewell. Even without Feng Sha and Yang Gongdu, he would not have been able to avoid this calamity. Immortal Lord Luo was destined to come. This was the karma left behind by Chu Kuanga, so he naturally had to bear it. Guan Siyu was not someone who craved life and feared death, but he was truly reluctant at this moment. However, some things were even more important than one's life. If he wasn't the hall master of the punishment hall and was only the punishment master or the head of the punishment hall, then Guan Siyu could very well hide at the side and not voice any opinion. If Immortal Lord Luo were to start a massacre, he would resist with all his might. If not, he would not make a sound. But now, he was the leader of the Guanzhong torture room. Some karma and responsibility had to be shouldered. Others could retreat, but he couldn't. Guan Siyu took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Although I know that these words are very vulgar, I still have to say them. If you want to touch Chu Kuangge's mausoleum, then you'll have to do it over my dead body." "You're so stubborn." Immortal Lord Luo shook his head. He formed a seal with both his hands and pinched an extremely strange seal. He crossed his arms. In an instant, with Guan Siyu as the center, everything within a radius of 1,000 feet was completely separated and enveloped. It was as though Guan Siyu was in a different world from the people present. As Immortal Lord Luo clenched his arms, the space began to shrink in an instant. Guan Siyu, who was in the middle of it, roared furiously and performed the 9 changes continuously. All kinds of powerful moves were thrown out one after another. The power was extremely shocking, but it was as though they were confined to that side of the world and could not be broken at all. Chu Xiao could see that although Immortal Lord Luo's move did not leave any traces, he was probably using something similar to a realm that completely separated Guan Siyu from the outside world. Most of the people in the Elysium only existed in the legends of the underworld. Even the wind-sweeping tower did not dare to release the information of the people in the Elysium due to certain reasons. However, in Chu Xiao's opinion, the warriors in the Elysium, or rather Sir God Luo, always felt like he was looking at ants when he looked at these ordinary warriors. This was very wrong. It was not like Chu Xiao had never seen an expert in the true fire cultivation realm. Whether it was a martial Dao master or a true fire cultivation realm, they were ultimately only in the first level of the martial Dao realm. However, Immortal Lord Luo seemed to think of himself as a superior existence. This did not seem to be because of his strength, but because of his background. In Immortal Lord Luo's eyes, he seemed to represent the heavens and regarded people outside of divine gates as ants. Chu Xiao did not know whether Immortal Lord Luo's mentality was weird, or if all the warriors from divine gates were like this. If it was the latter, then divine gates was a very terrifying force. They were simply a group of paranoid lunatics. If it were Chu Xiao doing such a thing, he would not put in as much effort as Immortal Lord Luo and even attack Guan Siyu. He simply said that if she did not hand over Chu Kuangge's mausoleum, he would kill everyone in the Guanzhong torture room and bring them in front of Guan Siyu to be killed one by one. He guaranteed that Guan Siyu would be forced to agree before he killed more than 10 people. Of course, he could attack Guan Siyu first. The strongest had already been eliminated, let alone the others. It was just a little more effort. However, no matter how much effort Immortal Lord Luo put in, Guan Siyu would not be able to withstand more than a few moves from him. In the realm, Guan Siyu performed the divine power of the 9 transformations continuously, but it was still useless. Seeing that the realm was getting tighter, Guan Siyu roared in anger. Countless blood qi erupted around her and the divine power of the 9 transformations merged into one. It was an extremely pure power that coiled around Guan Siyu. It was as red as blood and its power was extremely strong. Guan Siyu took a deep look in front of her. However, she was not looking at Immortal Lord Luo, but at Mei Qinglian. The next moment, the power transformed into a giant blade that was as red as blood and slashed at Immortal Lord Luo. Immortal Lord Luo frowned. Then he pinched it gently. In an instant, the blood mist dissipated. In the realm, Guan Siyu's figure had already disappeared, leaving behind only a fine blood mist. However, it was like dust that had completely dissipated. Everyone present was stunned as they looked at everything in a daze. Guan Siyu had died. She had died so easily that no one could believe their eyes. Chu Xiao sighed in his heart. Immortal Lord Luo's matter was the truth that had led to the drastic change in the Guanzhong torture room. His exposure was actually an accident. If he had not existed, Guan Siyu in the original plot would probably have made the same choice. Immortal Lord Luo looked at the warriors from the Guanzhong torture room and said, "Now, can anyone tell me where Chu Kuangge's tomb is? I'll fight it out with you." A few warriors from the Guanzhong torture room stood up and roared angrily as they charged at Immortal Lord Luo. However, Immortal Lord Luo merely moved his fingers gently, and the few of them exploded into a blood mist. The difference between their realms was too great. To Immortal Lord Luo, killing these people was really no different from stepping on a few ants. Immortal Lord Luo pointed at one person and said, "You, tell me, where is Chu Kuangge's tomb?" The man gritted his teeth and struggled to decide whether he should say it or not. If he said it, He could save his life, but he would definitely be despised by everyone. Even he himself would not be able to overcome this obstacle. However, seeing that the martial artist was hesitating, Sir God Luo pointed with his finger, and the martial artist immediately exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Everyone shuddered at the sight of it. Just as immortal Lord Luo turned to look at another person, that person quickly shouted, "I'll tell you. I know where Chu Kuanga's tomb is. It's in the basement of the back hall. The tomb of all the past hall masters of the Guanzhong torture room who died in the torture hall is there." Immortal Lord Luo muttered, "Why didn't you say so earlier? Why waste time?" Immortal Lord Luo suddenly took a step forward and a powerful force seeped into the ground. Everywhere it passed, the ground cracked and revealed the basement of the back hall. After the warrior pointed at Chu Kuanga's coffin, Immortal Lord Luo opened the coffin and took out the secret space box and some funerary objects. Because Chu Kuanga was a thrifty person, there were not many funerary objects. They were just his personal belongings. Immortal Lord Luo opened the secret space box and laughed when he saw what was inside. He had been looking for it for decades and he had finally found it. The last time he failed, he was mocked by the other divine generals in the divine gates for a long time. This time, things were finally settled. The other warriors of the Guanzhong torture room glared at Immortal Lord Luo and wanted to swallow him alive. The underground palace where the past hall masters of the Guanzhong torture room were buried was opened. Immortal Lord Luo's action was like digging up someone's ancestral grave. At that moment, the warrior who led the way heaved a sigh of relief. Now that he had found what he wanted, he could live, right? However, before he could react, Emperor Luo moved his hand and the martial artist exploded into a cloud of blood mist in an instant. Immortal Lord Luo said faintly, "I forgot to mention that I hate traitors too." Seeing that, some of the warriors who were not strong-willed cursed in their hearts. This man was a lunatic. Stubbornness meant that he didn't know how to appreciate favors and was stubborn. In the end, he agreed to it and became a traitor. Anyway, he was going to die anyway. Was he going to be reasonable? After getting what he wanted, Immortal Lord Luo glanced at Chu Xiao and Mei Qinglian. However, he only smiled mysteriously. He took a step forward and disappeared. He had seen Chu Xiao, Mei Qinglian, and the messy things that happened in the Guanzhong torture room from the outside. Immortal Lord Luo couldn't be bothered with the grudges and intrigues between the ants. When he was in a good mood, he might watch the show for a while. However, he was pressed for time to leave the divine gates and he didn't even have time to watch the show. Chapter 631. Although Divine Lord Luo had left, the drama of the Guanzhong torture room had yet to come to an end. With Guan Xiyu dead, who should be in charge of the Guanzhong torture room? If not for Chu Xiao, according to the original trajectory, the person who would be in charge of the Guanzhong torture room after Guan Xiyu's death should have been great leader in Liaonian. In the Guanzhong torture room, only his seniority and prestige could temporarily suppress the Guanzhong torture room and contend against Mei Qinglian. Now that in Liaonian was dead, and Mei Qinglian and Chu Xiao's identities had been exposed, what should they do? Just as the entire place was silent, Chu Xiao's voice suddenly rang out. "Eunuch Chen, since you're here, don't be in a hurry to leave." Eunuch Chen, who was preparing to retreat with a group of Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards, turned his head. His expression was slightly twisted, and there was fear in it. This time, His Highness the Crown Prince had suffered a great loss. Yang Gongdu was a famous scholar that His Highness the Crown Prince had spent a great deal of effort to invite. Under His Highness the Crown Prince's command, he had indeed increased His Highness the Crown Prince's power by a lot. For example, the group of Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards under their command had been calculated by Yang Gongdu. Otherwise, with the Crown Prince's frequent foolish moves, it would already be good if His Majesty did not hate them, let alone the Dragon Riders' Imperial Guards. But now, Yang Gongdu had died here, and it seemed like even he could not leave. Turning his head to look at Chu Xiao, Eunuch Chen shouted, "Chu Xiao, don't forget, I belong to His Highness the Crown Prince. I belong to the Eastern Qi Imperial Court." Chu Xiao flashed a smile at Eunuch Chen, as if he was looking at an idiot. Hee. Eunuch Chen was really panicking. At this time, he still wanted to use the Crown Prince and the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to pressure Chu Xiao. However, he had forgotten that Chu Xiao had never been afraid of trash like LV Longji from the beginning. It wasn't the first time he had tricked the Crown Prince. Moreover, Now that Chu Xiu's identity as a devil had been exposed, he didn't mind being more unscrupulous. Moreover, he had a good relationship with the second prince, LV Longguang. He believed that LV Longguang would be very happy if he got rid of the eunuch and would help him take care of everything. With one step, Chu Xiu instantly appeared in front of Eunuch Chen. Eunuch Chen knew Chu Xiu's strength. Moreover, the current Chu Xiu was 10 times more terrifying than the Chu Xiu he knew before. At that moment, Eunuch Chen began to burn his qi and blood, wanting to make one last attempt. However, as he burned, he realized that his qi and blood were burning more and more vigorously. It was so vigorous that even he couldn't stop it. As Chu Xiu waved his hand, the blood mist scattered. Under Chu Xiu's demonic blood technique, Eunuch Chen directly burned up all the essence and blood in his body. He turned into a dried corpse and fell to the ground. The dragon riders behind Eunuch Chen all revealed expressions of fear, but not a single one of them fled. They still gripped their weapons tightly in their hands and faced Chu Xiu. It had to be said that as a force that belonged exclusively to the Eastern Qi imperial family, the dragon riders' loyalty was very high, not to mention their own strength. People like Chu Xiu's father, who had betrayed the dragon riders' imperial army in the face of treasures and betrayed their brothers, were in the minority. Glancing at these people, Chu Xiu did not kill them. He only took out a token and said in a low voice, "Everyone, the Crown Prince's people are already dead. You Dragon Riders' imperial army are only loyal to the imperial family, not to the Crown Prince. A wise man submits to circumstances. For you Dragon Riders' imperial army, there is no difference between obeying the second prince and obeying the Crown Prince." The token Chu Xiu took out belonged to the second prince. Back then the second prince wanted to recruit Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu did not agree. However, because Chu Xiu had helped the second prince trick the Crown Prince, the second prince naturally wanted to form a good relationship with Chu Xiu. This token was given to Chu Xiu by the second prince. In reality, other than representing the second prince's identity, this thing did not have much use. It could not mobilize the army, nor could it mobilize the forces under the second prince. This was because they did not recognize the token, but the person. However, in this situation this token was just right. The Dragon Riders' imperial army looked at each other, then cupped their hands towards Chu Xiu and said, "Greetings, Your Excellency." It was true that the Dragon Riders' imperial army was loyal to the imperial family, but this did not mean that they were idiots. If they could avoid death, then it was naturally better not to. At this moment, since Chu Xiu had the second prince's token, and they had all heard that Chu Xiu was related to the second prince, it was not a big deal for them to temporarily listen to Chu Xiu's orders. As for whether or not the Crown Prince would cause trouble for them afterwards, the Dragon Riders' imperial army was not worried at all. The Dragon Riders' imperial army's true backer was the Emperor of Eastern Qi. As long as they did not betray the Eastern Qi imperial family, it did not matter whose orders they listened to. The Dragon Riders' imperial army had no position in the struggle for the throne. This was something that everyone in Eastern Qi knew. The heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand slashed at the formation plate imprisoning Mei Qinglian, producing a loud clang. After slashing at it more than 10 times, the formation plate finally could not take it anymore and finally dissipated. Exchanging a glance with Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiu said to the stewards of the Dragon Riders' imperial army in a deep voice, "I will have to trouble you to guard the main entrance of the torture chamber. Without my permission, no one is allowed to take a single step out. Once the matter of the Guanzhong torture room is over, I will send a letter to the second prince and ask for your rewards on your behalf." The stewards of the Dragon Riders' imperial army looked at each other and nodded. They immediately followed Chu Xiu's instructions and began to seal off the Guanzhong torture room headquarters. Today's events were a little bizarre. They had followed the Crown Prince's men to cause trouble for Chu Xiu, but now, because of the second prince, they had to listen to Chu Xiu's orders. But no matter who they listened to, as long as Chu Xiu did not harm the interests of Eastern Qi, everything would be fine. Moreover, with Yang Gongdu's death, the Crown Prince did not seem to be in a good situation. At this time, it was not a big deal for them to slightly lean towards the second prince. But when the people in the Guanzhong torture room heard Chu Xiu's orders, their expressions changed drastically. Feng Sha shouted, "Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do? Do you think that with Hallmaster Guan's death, you can take over the entire Guanzhong torture room? In your dreams." Chu Xiu turned to look at Feng Sha and said calmly, "It is precisely because of Hallmaster Guan's death that I have to temporarily stabilize the situation in the Guanzhong torture room. Moreover, Hallmaster Guan did not strip me of my position as the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room even before his death. So, I am still one of the 4 torture officers. As for you, Leader Fong, as the head of the arrest department, you have colluded with outsiders to cause trouble in the Guanzhong torture room. The one who should be killed is you. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu moved. The heavenly demon dance in his hand surged with demonic aura and slashed at Feng Sha with a powerful force. Xiao Yi and the other torture officers in the Guanzhong torture room looked conflicted, but no one made a move. Chu Xiu spoke in a dignified manner. Although Guan Siyu did not strip him of his position as torture officer, if Divine Lord Luo had not suddenly intervened, Guan Siyu would have killed Chu Xiu with a slap. How could he have the chance to flaunt his power here? However, just like when Divine Lord Luo had attacked earlier, absolute power represented everything. At present, Divine Lord Luo, who was the most powerful, had left. Yang Gongdu and Eunuch Chen had suffered a crushing defeat. The remaining dragon riders had even become Chu Xiu's accomplices. Therefore, even if Mei Qinglian was not included, Chu Xiu was the most powerful person in the Guanzhong torture room. Although Chu Xiu was not a martial Dao master, in the eyes of the crowd, Feng Sha was the one at a disadvantage when he was fighting Feng Sha. When they thought of Chu Xiu's identity as Lin Yi, how many martial Dao masters had died in Chu Xiu's hands? Just thinking about it sent chills down their spines. Feng Sha gritted his teeth and retreated hastily. As a martial Dao master, it was indeed embarrassing for him to choose to retreat instead of attacking a junior martial artist like Chu Xiu. He had seen the fight between Guan Siyu and Chu Xiu just now. With the power that he possessed, he was indeed no match for him. However, how could Chu Xiu let him leave so easily? Now that Guan Siyu was dead and the Guanzhong torture room was without a leader, wasn't it the best time to take over the Guanzhong torture room? Although Chu Xiu did not plan to take action so soon, he wanted to at least wait until he had an absolute advantage in the Guanzhong torture room. However, he did not expect such an accident to happen. Although the situation was a little rushed, the most troublesome person, Guan Siyu, was already dead. If he did not take action now to stabilize the situation, when would he do so? Looking in the direction that Feng Sha fled, Chu Xiu did not chase after him. Instead, he used his primordial spirit as a bow in his mind as the string to shoot a soul-destroying arrow that carried a terrifying aura. Invisible mental strength condensed into an arrow and shot out. It arrived behind Feng Sha almost instantly. The crimson qi around Feng Sha erupted. He actually chose to burn his blood essence to resist Chu Xiu's soul-destroying arrow. He was extremely decisive. Although the soul-destroying arrow's majestic qi and blood power was offset by most of its power, it still made Feng Sha groan and feel a sharp pain in his head. However, before he could react, Chu Xiu's figure had already appeared in front of him. He performed the formless sealing handprint, and life and death were all in his palm. The huge handprint suddenly descended. Everywhere it passed, the qi of heaven and earth was twisted and killed by the handprint. Feng Sha's qi and blood condensed around him. Using his qi and blood as a guide, he performed the annihilating heaven and earth obliterating selfless killing fist to meet the huge handprint. However, he was still forced back step by step, and large amounts of blood flowed out. Before he could react, a resplendent saber gleam appeared in front of him. It contained boundless hatred and triggered the mental demons in his body. This was not the hatred saber. Instead, it was Chu Xiu's demonic dance. It simulated the power of the hatred saber that could affect one's emotions. Because it was Chu Xiu himself, although it was not as powerful as the real hatred saber, it would not cause a backlash. As the saber slashed down, Feng Sha's eyes instantly turned crimson. He hated Guan Siyu for being infatuated with Mei Qinglian. He also hated Yang Gongdu for using him. He hated Chu Xiu, who wanted to kill him. However, the stronger his hatred, the greater the power of Chu Xiu's saber. When Feng Sha lost all reason and charged crazily towards Chu Xiu's saber, he realized that something was wrong. However, it was already too late. The saber fell, and Feng Sha's head flew into the sky. He no longer had the chance to hate. Chapter 632. With Feng Sha dead, the situation was set for the time being. All 3 martial arts grandmasters in the Guanzhong torture room had fallen. It could be said that Chu Xiu was now the strongest person in the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu looked back at Xiao Yi and the others and said calmly, Now that the Guanzhong torture room has suffered a great change, please rest in the main hall for the time being and don't leave. In 3 days, we will have a meeting in the main hall to discuss the future of the Guanzhong torture room. Whether it was Yin Batong, who had a grudge against Chu Xiu, or Chu Simo, who had sided with Chu Xiu before, none of them said anything. Instead, it was Xiao Yi who said in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, do you want to annex the Guanzhong torture room and become the new hall master?" With all due respect, although Hall Master Guan is dead, even if we all agree, you can't really control the Guanzhong torture room. There are too many loopholes in your identity. Even if we don't spread the news, Yang Gongdu has already left evidence in Eastern Qi's crown prince. When it is announced to the Jianghu, your identity will be completely exposed. If you were only Chu Xiu and not Lin Yi, the hero of diabolism, then with your reputation and status in the Guanzhong torture room, it won't be a problem for you to take over the position of hall master. But after your identity is exposed, the Guanzhong torture room will not allow a guy from diabolism to become the new hall master. Even if we stand on your side, it will be useless. The others can just leave the Guanzhong torture room. So if you force it, all you will get is a broken Guanzhong torture room. Without these low-level arresters, it will be useless to force the torturers to stay. Xiao Yi smiled bitterly. He had no intention of deceiving Chu Xiu. He was just telling the truth. Speaking of which, it was time for the torturers to discuss where they should go. If Chu Xiu became the new hall master, they would not object, nor would they dare to object. But in that case, as he said, the Guanzhong torture room would completely fall apart. Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, "There is no need for Lord Xiao to worry about this. I have my own plans." Xiao Yi and the others had no choice but to follow Chu Xiu's instructions and stay in the Guanzhong torture room with their subordinates, waiting to see how things would change. After temporarily taking control of the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu immediately sent people to Guanxi and gathered all his men in Guanxi to the headquarters. In the end, the Imperial Dragon Riders were outsiders, and their strength was a bit lacking. On the other hand, Chu Xiu's men in Guanxi were his trusted aides. Even though Chu Xiu's identity had been exposed, he believed that the Ghost Hand King and the others would not mind joining the demonic path with him. After dealing with these matters in an orderly manner, Chu Xiu went to Mei Qinglian's room to discuss the follow-up matters. Ever since Guan Xiyu's death, Mei Qinglian had been a little distracted. The impact of this matter on her was too great. Seeing Mei Qinglian like this, Chu Xiu walked over and said, "Are you still sad about Hall Master Guan's death, Lady Saintess?" Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I can't say that I'm sad. I just feel a little complicated. After all, in the end, Guan Xiyu did not betray me." Chu Xiu also sighed and said, "Although our identities and goals are destined to oppose Hall Master Guan, I have to say that Hall Master Guan is still very admirable in some aspects. Now that he died in the hands of Divine Lord Luo, its karma passed down from the previous generation. In fact, this is also a good thing. It's better than having a life-and-death battle with us." Chu Xiu was not hypocritical when he said this. This time he was telling the truth. Although Guan Xiyu was dead, he did have a clear conscience. As a man, even though he knew that Mei Qinglian was the devil demon sex saintess, he still chose to protect Mei Qinglian. It was just that the price was to let Chu Xiu die first. And as the torture hall master, he did not choose to rely on Eastern Qi because of his own reasons. He still chose to maintain the independence of the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, Guan Xiyu's choice to rely on Eastern Qi was a very good choice for him. After all, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Although the power of the court was different from that of Jianghu, once they gathered together, it was a very terrifying thing. Relying on the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was equivalent to Guan Xiyu having a big backer. Perhaps even Divine Lord Luo could be stopped. At least he did not have to die. He could even make the Guanzhong torture room his private property and pass it on to his children or disciples. But at the moment of life and death, Guan Xiyu could clearly retreat, but he still chose to fight. He did not let down Chu Kuangga's kindness in training him. Although Chu Xiu stood on the opposite side of Guan Xiyu, he could not help but admire Guan Xiyu. When he spoke, he still addressed Guan Xiyu as Hall Master. For some people, some things were worth protecting with everything they had, even if they had to risk their lives for it. Chu Xiu did not know if he was such a person. Anyway, there was nothing for him to risk his life for now. On the contrary, Chu Xiu cherished his life very much. Only when he was alive could everything be possible. If he was dead, everything would naturally be in vain. At this time, Mei Qinglian stood up. She swept away her previous confusion and said in a low voice, "Given the current situation of the Guanzhong torture room, what do you want to do? Xiaoyi is right. When Eastern Qi reveals our identities, 80% of the people in the Guanzhong torture room will not agree to let you be the hall master. Even if you threaten them with force, they will directly leave the Guanzhong torture room. In the end, the entire Guanzhong torture room will fall apart. It will be useless for you to get an empty shell." Mei Qinglian was not a little girl who would be trapped by love. She was the holy virgin of the Yin demon sect and also a martial arts grandmaster of the Yinma clan. At this time, she had put away those complicated emotions and temporarily faced the situation in front of her. The real value of the Guanzhong torture room did not lie in its name, but in the large number of Jianghu constables and secret agents of the Guanzhong torture room. Although these people were usually inconspicuous, they were the core strength of the entire Guanzhong torture room. It could be said that other than Guan Siyu, the hall master, the other so-called leaders of the arrest division, torture officers, and patrol officers could be eliminated, but the large number of martial artists of the Guanzhong torture room at the bottom could not be eliminated. Therefore, the first problem in front of Chu Xiu was, how could they control the Guanzhong torture room? Chu Xiu asked in return, "Who said I want to be the hall master?" Mei Qinglian was stunned. Did Chu Xiu want to give up the hall master position? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I know what Xiaoyi said. I know how high my position in the Guanzhong torture room is. I also know that forcibly taking the hall master position is not upright, and it will indeed cause a lot of trouble. What we want is the entire Guanzhong torture room, not the so-called hall master reputation. Therefore, as long as we can control the hall master, what difference is there from controlling the Guanzhong torture room?" Mei Qinglian's eyes lit up. "You mean to find a puppet to be the hall master, and then we just need to control that puppet?" But then Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "But this puppet is also very difficult to find. Right now, there is no one in the Guanzhong torture room who is qualified for this position. Xiao Yi, Chu Simo, Si Ming, and the others have enough seniority, but not enough prestige. Actually, if your identity is not exposed, you are the most suitable person to be the hall master. Unfortunately, there is no suitable person now." At this moment, a strange expression appeared on Chu Xiu's face. He said, "Actually, the position of hall master does not require strength. If someone is too strong, we won't be able to control them. What we need is someone who is qualified to inherit the hall master position. At least in terms of status, no one can stop him from becoming the hall master. And coincidentally, there is such a person in the Guanzhong torture room." Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "Who are you talking about?" Chu Xiu pointed outside and said, "Of course it's the former hall master Chu Kuangga's only son, Chu Yuanxing. If he becomes the hall master, who in the entire Guanzhong torture room would dare to say no?" When Mei Qinglian heard this, her eyes immediately lit up. The person Chu Xiu chose was indeed very clever. In the entire Guanzhong torture room, there was indeed no one more suitable than Chu Yuanxing for this position. Even when Chu Kuangga was on the verge of death, with his prestige in the Guanzhong torture room, if he forcefully pushed for Chu Yuanxing to become the hall master, no one in the Guanzhong torture room would object. Guan Siyu would even be willing to help Chu Yuanxing secure this position. However, Chu Kuangga was truly selfless. He knew that his son was not suited to be a hall master. It would be difficult for him to even become a patrol inspector. That was why he stood his ground and gave the position of hall master to Guan Siyu. Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "But, will Chu Yuanxing agree to your request? I know Chu Yuanxing quite well. Although he can't even compare to a 10,000th of his father, and is very disappointing, he is not a cowardly person who is afraid of death. If you force him into a corner, he will fight to the death with you." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Saintess, you underestimate me. In the past, Chu Yuanxing was my benefactor who brought me into the Guanzhong torture room. Why would I threaten him? Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. You need to contact Senior Wei as soon as possible and ask him or Senior Chu Wuji to come over. The real danger of the Guanzhong torture room is yet to come. If we don't handle this matter well, even if we successfully control the Guanzhong torture room, we won't be able to hold on for long." Mei Qinglian was puzzled and asked, "Handle what matter well?" Chu Xiu touched his nose and said, It's mainly about me. I used the identity of Lin Yi to kill a lot of people and caused a lot of trouble. There are countless comic ties. When my identity is exposed, you can imagine how those people will react. Therefore, we need to think of a way to deal with it in advance. Chu Xiao was also very helpless at this moment. This was the price of attracting too much hatred. Sooner or later, he would have to pay for it. Chapter 633. When Chu Xiao used Lin Ye's identity, he killed to his heart's content. He simply had no qualms about killing. But now, it was time to pay back the karma he had sown back then. In fact, Chu Xiao was already mentally prepared for such an outcome. After all, he did not imagine that he could hide his identity for the rest of his life. However, Chu Xiao did not expect that his identity would be exposed so quickly. This also made Chu Xiao a little unprepared, so things were a little tricky. But now was not the time to think about this. Temporarily stabilizing the Guanzhong torture room was the most important thing. Wei Shuya and the others could not teleport. After Mei Qinglian sent the message, it would take some time for them to come here. The Imperial Dragon Riders were very fast. This group of people obeyed orders very strictly. As soon as Chu Xiao issued the order, they had already chosen a martial artist with the fastest movement technique and brought the order to Guanxi. The next day, they had already brought the Ghost Hand King and the others here. Of course, most of the troops were still on the way. They were not as fast as the Ghost Hand King and the others. Seeing Chu Xiao again, the Ghost Hand King and the others felt a little strange. They did not expect Chu Xiao to be Lin Yi, who had recently risen to fame in the Yinma clan. This made them feel strange. It was as if they had never really known Chu Xiao. Of course, the Ghost Hand King already had some premonition. After all, he was the person who had the most contact with Chu Xiao. He was sure that Chu Xiao's identity was not that simple. He just did not expect Chu Xiao to have such a powerful background. Lu Hongye, who had been in seclusion in Guanxi, also came. He was even more shocked than the Ghost Hand King and the others. He was not Chu Xiao's subordinate, and he had never associated Chu Xiao with Lin Yi. Who knew that someone would suddenly tell him that Lin Yi was Chu Xiao? Even a martial Dao master like him, who had been through a lot, could not react to such a mysterious thing. Looking at everyone present, Chu Xiao said indifferently, "I'm sorry, everyone. I hid it from you for so long. Now, everyone knows my identity. Of course, identity is identity. I, Chu Xiao, am still Chu Xiao. It's just that I'm not the Chu Xiao of the Guanzhong torture room, but the Chu Xiao of the Devil's Path. So, what comes next is up to you all to choose. Those who are willing to join the demonic path with me will remain the same in the future. I dare not say that you have a bright future, but at the very least if you follow me, Chu Xiao, I won't let you suffer." Upon hearing this, the Ghost Hand King and the others from the Blue Dragon Society did not even think about it. They immediately stood behind Chu Xiao. The Ghost Hand King smiled and said, "This old man is not young anymore. I can't withstand the messy storms of the pugilistic world. I don't want to wander anymore. It's good that I don't have to worry about official Chu." In fact, the Ghost Hand King only looked old. Under Chu Xiao, he was treated well, even better than Tangya and the others. After all, he was someone who helped Chu Xiao take care of some of the chores. Even if he didn't fill his own pockets, it was okay for him to be a little biased in terms of cultivation resources. Chu Xiao knew that when the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Moreover, the Ghost Hand King did not take everything for himself. He gave Tangya and the others a lot of cultivation resources. No one would complain about the Ghost Hand King because of this, so Chu Xiao did not pursue the matter. After going through this period of pampered cultivation, coupled with the Guanxi area's techniques that the Ghost Hand King could read at will, he had long stepped into the 5 cheese gathering in the Origin Realm, the same as Tangya and the others. However, because he was a little older when he stepped into the 3 Flower Realm, he always looked very old. Although the Ghost Hand King's cultivation was improving rapidly, he was becoming less and less fond of fighting with others. In his opinion, wasn't it better to be a butler for Chu Xiao and take care of these chores better than being a killer in the Blue Dragon Society? As for the other warriors from the Blue Dragon Society, they also stood on Chu Xiao's side without hesitation. Tangya smiled and said, "Official Chu has been hiding it from us for a long time. If I had known that you were from the demonic path, I would have asked you to teach me demonic arts. I am very interested in this thing." Yen Bugue stood behind Chu Xiu with his giant sword on his back. He was a man of few words, but at this time he also said, "The demonic path is very good. The demonic path can kill more people." The rest of the fire slaves and the others also expressed their opinions. No one wanted to fall behind. For them, there was no substantial difference between the Blue Dragon Society and the Hidden Demon Clan. Anyway, their reputation in the Jianghu was not that good. The only difference was that when they were in the Blue Dragon Society, they did more work and took less. On the other hand, under Chu Xiu's command, they worked less and received more. Therefore, they didn't care what Chu Xiu's identity was. As long as Chu Xiu could still give them the same treatment, they would not betray him. Lu Hongye also stood behind Chu Xiu silently. At this time, he had no other choice. No matter what Chu Xiu's identity was, he had to follow Chu Xiu to the end. Chu Xiu could still use two identities, but in the Battle of Red Maple Valley, he indirectly helped Chu Xiu kill so many people. There was no turning back. Lu Jianhong was dead, so he could only act as Lu Hongye for the rest of his life. Some of Chu Xiu's subordinates had joined Chu Xiu because of Lu Fengxian. They only hesitated for a moment, but they did not choose to leave. These people were all rogue cultivators. After joining Chu Xiu, they had a very easy life. It was quite difficult to find a force with such freedom and good treatment. Moreover, most of these people were loyal people. They were Lu Fengxian's friends. When Lu Fengxian was being hunted, they helped Lu Fengxian escape from northern Yan. It was Chu Xiu who took them in, so at this time, they naturally could not betray Chu Xiu. The only ones who were hesitant were Du Guangzhong and the other warriors who came from the Guangzhong torture room. Logically speaking, they all grew up in the Guangzhong torture room. They also knew that Chu Xiu was the traitor and should be eliminated. But they were Chu Xiu's subordinates. In all fairness, compared to when they were under Wei Jiuduan, Chu Xiu treated them 10 times better. They were much more powerful in Guanxi, and they did not have to fight against each other. As long as they were strong enough, they could stand out. Therefore, after arguing for a moment, Du Guangzhong took the lead and said, "I'm grateful for official Chu's recognition. If it weren't for you, I would have to live the rest of my life in Guanxi. As long as I can follow you, what's the harm in falling into the devil's path?" Seeing Du Guangzhong express his opinion, the other Jianghu arresters of Guanxi immediately cursed at him. Although this guy usually looked honest, when it came to flattery, they were a little tired of it. But now that Du Guangzhong had expressed his opinion, they naturally could not fall behind. People tended to follow blindly, and they immediately began to express their loyalty to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Don't worry, everyone. If you don't betray me, I won't betray you either. Right now, the Guangzhong torture room is in chaos. From now on, everyone will have to move. Tangya, Yan Bugue, the two of you come with me. Ghost Hand King, bring the others to take over the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army. Take the second prince's warrant and ask them to cooperate with you. Compared to them, I naturally trust you more. If you encounter someone causing trouble and you can't handle it, then go find Senior Lu Hongye. He's a martial arts grandmaster, and with his strength in the entire Guangzhong city, he can suppress all the troublemakers. Remember, during this period of time, no one is allowed to leave the Guangzhong city, nor is anyone allowed to enter the Guangzhong city." "Yes, sir." Everyone responded in unison. After Chu Xiu left with Tangya and Yen Bugue, Ghost Hand King began to issue commands in high spirits. Du Guangzhong, on the other hand, sighed helplessly. In the past, they, the local constables of the Guangzhong torture room, had many conflicts with Ghost Hand King and others from the Blue Dragon Society. At that time, both sides were evenly matched. One side was strong, and the other side had more people. But from now on, they really could not win against Ghost Hand King and others. Because they hesitated. Attitude was very important. Ghost Hand King stood on Chu Xiu's side at the first moment. Although they also chose to be loyal to Chu Xiu in the end, that moment of hesitation had already determined who was superior. Looking at Chu Xiu's attitude now, he brought Yen Bugue and Tangya with him, leaving Ghost Hand King to command the overall situation, while they could only be subordinates. Du Guangzhong also scolded himself in his heart for being so indecisive. If he had stood on Chu Xiu's side at the first moment like Ghost Hand King and others, the result might have been different. At this time, Chu Xiu was too lazy to care about the open and secret struggles of his subordinates. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. If his subordinates were all in harmony, then there would be a problem. As long as they did not fight and affect their own strength, Chu Xiu was too lazy to care. At this time, Chu Xiu was leading his men to the residence of Chu Yuanxing in Guangzhou City. At present, Guangzhou City was under martial law. Whether it was the Guangzhou torture room martial artists in the city, or some pedestrians and merchants, nobody was allowed to enter or leave. The city was in a state of panic, and the number of pedestrians had decreased. Tang Yi stood behind Chu Xiu and asked curiously, "Sir, I heard that you are very familiar with soul-seizing Saberly Filian, the fifth on the Longhu leaderboard? The two of you had once joined hands to kill the martial arts grandmaster Zhen Yongzi of the Chunyang Dao sect?" Chu Xiu turned his head and said, "Are you interested in Li Filian?" Tang Yi grinned and said, "They both use flying knives and concealed weapons. That person is a senior. Ask around and see if you can learn by analogy." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's not the same. Your concealed weapons are real concealed weapons, but Li Filian's flying knives are not. They are an open and above-board attack. They will definitely hit their target. Cause and effect are involved, and the knife will seize the soul. Li Filian's martial arts can't be learned by others, and can't be taught by others. You don't have to think about learning by analogy. However, you can develop in another direction. You can turn complexity into simplicity and condense your hidden weapons together. The most important thing is not the hidden weapons themselves, but the person who uses them." Chapter 634. Of the warriors under Chu Xiu's command, Chu Xiu was most optimistic about the warriors from the Blue Dragon Society. They had previously been the elites of the Heaven Sin Division. Now that they had joined Chu Xiu, they had better resources, and their cultivation speed had improved by leaps and bounds. Of these people, the Wolf King and the Fire Slave were slightly less talented. While they worked hard enough, their talent was limited. If they did not have opportunities, their achievements in this life would be limited. On the other hand, Tang Yi and Yanbu Gui's age and talent were considered to be above average. Tang Yi was slightly lazy. Right now, he was half a step into the unity of the world. Breaking through this realm was only a matter of time. As for Yanbu Gui, his talent was a little mysterious. Even Chu Xiu could not understand it. Chu Xiu did not know what Yanbu Gui was thinking about, nor did he know where his comprehension of the martial way had reached. Perhaps one day when he was in a daze or practicing his sword, he would be able to break through. So for these two people, Chu Xiu did not mind teaching them. Although Chu Xiu's realm was only one level higher than theirs, when it came to martial Dao attainments, Chu Xiu had already far surpassed most martial Dao masters. Tang Yi nodded thoughtfully. Chu Xiu then turned to Yanbu Gui, but in the end, he still shook his head and said, "Your martial Dao is too unique, different from mine. I can't give you any pointers, but you just have to remember one thing, and that is to hold fast to your own martial Dao. When any martial Dao is developed to the extreme, its power will be earth-shattering. The strongest is not martial arts, not weapons, not martial arts. It will always be people." Yanbu Gui nodded his head. His eyes were unfocused, and no one knew if he understood or not. Chu Xiu's understanding came from his experience. Just like how he had fought his way to the Ba Mountain Sword Sect. The Ba Mountain Sword Sect was one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. In the past they had been extravagant, and had produced several powerful people who could stir the world. But now it had completely declined. Even a junior like Chu Xiu had come knocking on their door. Like a tiger made of paper, they were almost annihilated. It was the same martial arts, the same legacy, but this generation of Ba Mountain Sword Sect was so weak. This could not be blamed on the ancestors or the method. It could only be said that this generation was not good enough. The mansion that Chu Yuanxing lived in was very conspicuous in Guangzhou City. But at this time, the mansion was draped with white wreaths, and some of the servants were wearing mourning clothes. There was a faint sound of crying coming from the mansion. Chu Xiu knew what was going on. Chu Yuanxing was leading a group of people to cry Chu Kuanga. Divine Lord Luo had forced open Chu Yuanxing's tomb and insulted the dead. This was not only an insult to the Guangzhou torture room, but also to Chu Yuanxing, the only son of Chu Kuanga. There were 2 warriors of the Chu family guarding the gate of the mansion. They could be counted as people of the Guangzhou torture room, but the Guangzhou torture room had specially used them to protect Chu Yuanxing. They were extremely loyal to Chu Yuanxing. Seeing Chu Xiao come, the two warriors of the Guanzhong torture room instinctively pulled out their weapons and looked warily at Chu Xiao. Although what happened in the main hall did not spread on a large scale, so many people saw it. It was impossible to hide it, so they naturally heard the news. They also knew that Chu Xiao was secretly Lin Yi of the Yinma clan. They also knew that he was plotting to overthrow the Guanzhong torture room. At this time, seeing Chu Xiao come to find Chu Yuanxing, they subconsciously thought that Chu Xiao was up to no good. Tanya walked forward and chuckled. His hands trembled slightly, and two dragon-tail soul-chasing darts flew out of his hands. They directly smashed the weapons of the two people, and even made their hands bleed. It was very frightening. Tanya had a smile on his face, but his words were merciless. Hero Chu Yuanxing is the sworn brother of my master. Why would he need you watchdogs to protect him? Get out of my way! The two warriors looked at each other with anger and sorrow in their eyes. They could only step aside helplessly. It was useless to be loyal. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. They would only die if they rushed forward. Walking into the main hall, they saw Chu Kuanga's coffin. Chu Yuanxing, dressed in mourning clothes, was kneeling and crying in front of the coffin. Father, I am unfilial and incompetent. I actually let you be humiliated after your death. I am incompetent. While crying, Chu Yuanxing heard a voice behind him. He looked back and saw Chu Xiao. Chu Yuanxing couldn't help but say angrily, Chu Xiao, what are you doing here? Back then, I was blind enough to take you into the Guanzhong torture hall. Are you here to laugh at me now? Chu Xiao walked slowly to Chu Kuanga's coffin, picked up 3 incense sticks, lit them with his internal force, and respectfully bowed to Chu Kuanga's coffin 3 times. After inserting the incense sticks, he said to Chu Yuanxing, Brother Chu, I have something to tell you. Chu Yuanxing snorted coldly. Don't call me brother. I don't deserve to have a brother like you, who is the number 1 among the younger generation of the demonic path. Chu Xiao shook his head and said, Brother Chu, I'm afraid you have misunderstood me. My identity has nothing to do with my people. With that, Chu Xiao gave Tanya a look. Tanya immediately smiled at the people in the main hall and said, Everyone, please wait outside for a moment. My master wants to talk to Hero Chu about something. The people present, whether they were Chu Yuanxing's servants or some warriors from the Guanzhong torture room, saw this scene and left tactfully. At this time, Chu Xiao happened to be powerful, and looking at Chu Xiao's appearance, he did not have any killing intent towards Chu Yuanxing. It was not worthwhile for them to fight to the death with Chu Xiao because of this. When Chu Yuanxing saw this, he shouted in panic, Chu Xiao, what are you doing? Tanya could not help but shake his head slightly. He had never seen Chu Kuanga, but based on the legends of Chu Kuanga in the past, and even though Chu Kuanga had been dead for decades, there were still Guan Siyu and other warriors from the Guanzhong torture room who were willing to die for him. It seemed that Chu Kuanga could definitely be called an outstanding person of the present age. It was a pity that the son of this legendary outstanding person of the present age was so unbearable. It was simply a disgrace. Chu Xiao forcibly helped Chu Yuanxing to sit on a chair at the side. He looked at Chu Yuanxing and asked without blinking, Brother Chu, ask yourself honestly. Although I am from the Devil Dao, when have my actions harmed the interests of the Guanzhong torture room? And all these years, how many benefits have I obtained for the Guanzhong torture room? It's true that I am from the Devil Dao, but in fact, people in the outside world have misunderstood my Yinma bloodline. My Yinma bloodline was chased by the righteous sections. I had no choice but to conceal my identity and change my identity to mingle in Jianghu. And there are many people like me in Jianghu, even in those big sections. What happened before? Now the rumors say that I, Chu Xiao, wanted to seize the Guanzhong torture room. But in fact, if Feng Sha had not colluded with the people of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, how could things have come to this point? Chu Yuanxing looked at Chu Xiao doubtfully. Chu Xiao was right. All these years in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiao did not do much to harm the interests of the Guanzhong torture room. On the contrary, he brought more things to the Guanzhong torture room. But all this could not cover up Chu Xiao's identity as a member of the Devil Dao. So Chu Yuanxing snorted and said, You have not harmed the interests of the Guanzhong torture room, but you Devil Dao murderers are extremely cunning. You and sister-in-law. No. It's Mei Qinglian, that witch, who has been lurking in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years. Doesn't she have the slightest ambition? What do you mean by coming here today? You want me to support you to become the new hall master of the Guanzhong torture room? Let me tell you, don't even think about it. Although I, Chu Yuanxing, am a good-for-nothing, I will not do such a thing. Even if you kill me, I will never speak. Chu Xiao shook his head and said, Brother Chu, I have said that you are my big brother. Why would I kill you? I really have never thought about the position of the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room. I also know that even if I do not have the identity of a devil Dao, with my qualifications and status, it will be very difficult to sit in this position. Chu Yuanxing frowned and said, Then why did you come here today? Chu Xiao pointed to Chu Kuanga's coffin and said, Chu Juxia's mausoleum was insulted. I, Chu Xiao, am still the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room, so I naturally have to come and pay my respects. As for the other thing, it is to invite Brother Chu to inherit the position of the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room. What did you say? Chu Yuanxing was shocked by Chu Xiao's words and almost stood up. He never thought that Chu Xiao would say such a thing to him. To be honest, Chu Yuanxing did think about the position of the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room, but that was when he was young. At that time, Chu Yuanxing's ambition was higher than the sky, and he even blamed Chu Kuanga in his heart. Why didn't he leave the position of the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room to his own son, but to an outsider? However, as he grew older, Chu Yuanxing's strength did not increase, and he also saw how much Guan Siyu had sacrificed for the Guanzhong torture room. If it were him, he would not be able to do it. So from then on, Chu Yuanxing gave up on this idea. He did not expect that today, Chu Xiao would propose him to be the hall master. How could Chu Yuanxing not be shocked? After calming down, Chu Yuanxing quickly waved his hand and said, No, how can I be the hall master? In the entire Guanzhong torture room, there are countless people who are stronger than me. If I were to be the hall master, I would destroy the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiao leaned forward and looked into Chu Yuanxing's eyes. There seemed to be a bottomless abyss in his eyes, emitting endless light that wanted to devour Chu Yuanxing. Brother Chu, the situation in the Guanzhong torture room is critical. Hall Master Guan is dead, and there is no martial Dao master in the entire Guanzhong torture room. Strength is no longer the most important thing. Right now, in the entire Guanzhong torture room, the only person who has enough prestige to be the hall master is you, Brother Chu. Moreover, Brother Chu, don't you want to be the hall master yourself? This belongs to you in the first place. Chapter 635. When facing Chu Yuanxing, Chu Xiao did not use much of his spiritual power. He only used his spiritual power to guide Chu Yuanxing's inner emotions. If Chu Yuanxing really did not have any obsession with the position of torture hall master, it would be useless no matter how Chu Xiao guided him. But on the contrary, what Chu Xiao triggered was the desire and inner demons in Chu Yuanxing's heart. Chu Yuanxing looked at Chu Xiao in confusion. The position of hall master should be mine? Chu Xiao nodded and said with a serious face, Of course it should be yours. Brother Chu, think about it carefully. If it wasn't for Lord Chu Kuanga, how could there be the Guanzhong torture room now? You are Lord Chu Kuanga's only son. Is it wrong to pass the Guanzhong torture room to you in the future? Chu Yuanxing said dejectedly, I was too useless, so father passed the position of hall master to hall master Guan in the end. Chu Xiao bowed towards Chu Kuanga's coffin and said, It is precisely because Lord Chu Kuanga is impartial that he did this. Hall Master Guan did not disappoint Lord Chu Kuanga's great trust and developed the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall to this state. But now, Hall Master Guan is dead. In the entire Guanzhong torture room, no one can take this position. Only you, Brother Chu, are different. You are Lord Chu Kuanga's only son. You have status and status. Now that the Guanzhong torture room has no leader, besides you, who else is qualified to take the position of hall master? Chu Xiao's words constantly aroused the desire in Chu Yuanxing's heart. The fire in his heart that had long been extinguished and his dream of becoming the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room seemed to be so close to him for the first time. However, although Chu Yuanxing was affected by the mental demon rotation technique, the mental demon rotation technique only affected his thoughts. It would not really turn him into an idiotic puppet that did not know how to think. Chu Yuanxing was still a little hesitant, but if I become the hall master, how can I convince others? After all, my strength is right there, and I can't even compare to an inspector. Chu Xiao waved his hand and said, Brother Chu, you don't have to worry about this. You are my big brother and your wife is Hall Master Guan's widow. We will all stand on your side. No one in the entire Guanzhong torture room will dare to oppose you. As long as Brother Chu agrees, during tomorrow's meeting, I will use my power to help you become the Hall Master. Seeing that Chu Yuanqing was still a little hesitant, Chu Xiao's voice sounded faintly in Chu Yuanqing's ears. Brother Chu, Lord Chu Kuanga's coffin is here. His spirit in heaven is also watching. As a father, all want their children to be successful. Who doesn't want their children to succeed? Lord Chu Kuanga must have the same thoughts, but he died accidentally in the hands of Divine Lord Luo. You are still young, so only Hall Master Guan can inherit this position. Lord Chu Kuanga did it for the good of the entire Guanzhong torture room. But now, no one is fighting with you for this position. Who else but you can be the Hall Master of the Guanzhong torture room? Don't you want to let Lord Chu Kuanga's spirit in heaven see that one day, his son has finally inherited his father's legacy and sat in this position? Chu Xiao's last sentence finally crushed Chu Yuanqing's state of mind. He seemed to have thought something through and let out a long sigh. He looked straight at Chu Xiao and said, I promised you, but I hope that this time you won't lie to me. Chu Xiao revealed a smile at the corner of his mouth and said, Brother Chu, don't worry. I can lie to anyone, but not to you. Patting Chu Yuanqing, who was still a little distracted, Chu Xiao directly turned around and walked out of the Chu family's mansion with Tang Ye. Tang Ye said from behind Chu Xiao, My lord, you are now supporting Chu Yuanqing to become the Hall Master. What if he stays in this position for too long and develops some other thoughts? Chu Xiao said lightly, He won't. My brother Chu is actually a very tactful person. This time, if I didn't provoke the desire in his heart, he wouldn't have agreed to take over the Hall Master position. The most important thing is that my brother Chu's ability is really limited. Even if he really wants to, he doesn't have the strength. No matter what, the Guanzhong torture room can only be considered to have a foothold in Jianghu since Chu Kuanga's generation. It's not bad to let it return to the Chu family's hands. Of course, it will only return to the Chu family's hands in name. As long as we can actually control the Guanzhong torture room, then there won't be a problem. Tang Ye nodded. What Chu Xiao said was right. With Chu Yuanqing's ability and shrewdness, even if he had other thoughts, he would be powerless. The next morning, the meeting in the Guanzhong torture room had already begun. The other 3 disciplinary officers, as well as Si Ming and the other leaders of the punishment department, had already arrived. Among them was Guan Siyu's disciple, Yuqi. Although Yuqi's strength couldn't be compared to the others, he was Guan Siyu's personal disciple, after all. In this kind of situation, he had a certain degree of authority. The meeting hall was dead silent. No one communicated, and no one dared to say anything unnecessary. Because the situation was already clear. If Chu Xiao wanted to become the Hall Master, they couldn't stop him. Whoever stopped him would die. However, being unable to stop him didn't mean that they had no other way. If Chu Xiao insisted on becoming the Hall Master, then the entire Guanzhong torture room would definitely fall apart. At that time, at worst, they could just leave. They couldn't afford to offend him, but couldn't they just hide? Their subordinates were all gone, so there was no point in them continuing to be disciplinary officers. At this moment, Chu Xiao walked into the meeting hall with Chu Yuanqing. When everyone saw that Chu Yuanqing was also there, they were all stunned, but then a look of disdain appeared in their eyes. They all thought that Chu Yuanqing had come to support Chu Xiao and wanted to support him to become the Hall Master of the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Yuanqing had a special status in the Guanzhong torture room. No matter how weak his strength was, he was still Chu Kuanga's only son. With this halo alone, he could obtain the respect of all the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room, even if it was only on the surface. However, at the moment, he wanted to support Chu Xiao, a criminal from the demonic path who had plotted to seize the position of the Guanzhong torture room hall master. This was a bit too degrading, and it was simply a disgrace to Lord Chu Kuanga. However, the next scene made everyone's jaws drop. Chu Xiao did not sit on the main seat, but helped Chu Yuanqing to sit on the main seat. He stood at the side and said in a deep voice, Everyone, the Guanzhong torture room has suffered a great change, but it cannot be without a leader. Right now, in the Guanzhong torture room, there are very few people who are qualified to take the position of Hall Master. As the only son of Lord Chu Kuanga, Chu Yuanqing has both prestige and status. I recommend him to be the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room hall master. Does anyone have any objections? Everyone present looked at each other with surprise in their eyes. No one thought that Chu Xiu would actually make Chu Yuanqing the hall master. Could it be done like this? However, no one present made a sound, because they did not know whether they should agree or not. As the only son of Lord Chu Kuanga, Chu Yuanqing had the status. But as for prestige, at least everyone present knew what kind of person Chu Yuanqing was. He had no prestige at all. Everyone respected him only because they respected Lord Chu Kuanga, and it had nothing to do with Chu Yuanqing himself. Moreover, now that Chu Xiu had personally supported Chu Yuanqing to become the hall master, even an idiot could guess that Chu Yuanqing was just a puppet, and the real mastermind behind the scenes was still Chu Xiu. However, if they did not agree with Chu Yuanqing's status, wouldn't it mean that they were disrespecting Lord Chu Kuanga? This move of Chu Xiu's was truly ingenious. It was simply putting them in a dilemma. Thus, remaining silent was the best choice. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly sneered at Yin Batong and said, "Lord Yin, I know you and I have a grudge before, and now I'm afraid you don't want me to stay in the Guanzhong torture room anymore. But the grudge can be solved later. Now, when the Guanzhong torture room is in chaos, you sent someone out of the city to contact the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Fang Sha sold the Guanzhong torture room once, and you plan to sell it again?" Seeing that Chu Xiu suddenly pointed the spearhead at him, Yin Batong hurriedly shouted, "Nonsense! I didn't." It was true that Yin Batong had a grudge against Chu Xiu, but it was precisely because of this that he had to be even more careful and low-key at this time, for fear that Chu Xiu would notice him. At this critical time, the Guanzhong torture room was leaderless, and Chu Xiu was in charge. Outside the Guanzhong city, there was a group of Dragon Riders Imperial Guards and Chu Xiu's subordinates guarding. Even if he had lost his mind, he would not play dirty tricks in the dark at this time to court death. Chu Xiu snorted coldly and said, "You're a traitor and you still dare to quibble." As his voice fell, Chu Xiu did not give Yin Batong a chance to continue to argue. With a wave of his hand, he exerted the devil blood technique to the extreme. In an instant, all the blood in Yin Batong's body was boiling, his blood vessels burst, and streams of blood were forcibly sucked out of Yin Batong's body. In shock, Yin Batong was just about to use his stellar energy to suppress it, but he saw the stellar energy that was sucked out of his body actually condense into the shape of a scimitar. In an instant, his protective stellar energy was broken, and his head was directly cut off. Two soft thuds were heard. Yin Batong's body and head fell to the ground together. Chu Xiu stood behind Chu Yuanqing and looked at the crowd, saying in a deep voice, "Now, does everyone agree that Chu Yuanqing will be the new hall master of the Guanzhong torture room?" After a moment of silence, Chu Simo was the first to stand up, and he cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, hall master." Among the people present, Chu Simo was the closest to Chu Xiu because of his disciple Chu Xiaoda, and he had spoken up for Chu Xiu before. Most importantly, he was greatly indebted to Chu Kuanga. Now that Chu Yuanqing had taken over the position of hall master of the Guanzhong torture room, he was willing to agree even if he knew that Chu Xiu was the real mastermind behind the Guanzhong torture room. When the others saw this, they could only stand up helplessly, and they cupped their hands and bowed to Chu Yuanqing, saying, "Greetings, hall master." At this moment, they were bowing, but no one knew if they were bowing to Chu Yuanqing, or to Chu Xiu, who was standing behind Chu Yuanqing. But that was no longer important. What was important was that they had already submitted. Of course they could choose not to submit. After all, Yin Batong's body was still lying on the ground. Although even they did not know if Yin Batong had done anything, it was obvious that the price of disobedience was death. Chapter 636. Chu Yuanqing taking over as the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room was a big deal for the entire Guanzhong torture room. The people who heard the news felt awkward at first. How could Chu Yuanqing be the hall master? But after thinking about it carefully, if the person who took over the position was not Chu Yuanqing, but Chu Xiu or someone else, they would not be able to accept it. As the situation was settled, Chu Xiu released the restrictions in Guanzhong city. But he sent some of his subordinates to infiltrate various places in Guanzhong. He believed that as long as there was enough time, the Guanzhong torture room would completely become his Chu Xiu Guanzhong torture room. Of course, it was almost the same now. Although Chu Yuanqing was the hallmaster in name, The one who actually controlled the Guanzhong torture room was still Chu Xiao. After another day, Chu Wuji came to the Guanzhong torture room. He came to find Chu Xiao and Mei Qinglian openly. Looking at the two, Chu Wuji showed a strange expression on his face. He said, "What happened? How did it become so chaotic all of a sudden?" Chu Wuji knew the real identity of Chu Xiao and Mei Qinglian. They were both lurking in the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Wuji thought that the Guanzhong torture room would definitely change hands if they worked together. But it should not be so hasty and chaotic. Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "There was an accident that caused us to be exposed. Our plan was all messed up." Then, Chu Xiao told Chu Wuji in detail what happened in the Guanzhong torture room recently. Chu Wuji furrowed his brows and said, "So it's that T*stirrer, Yang Gongdu. That fellow does have some intelligence. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to rise from a lowly talent to the point where he can stir up a storm. However, this guy thought too highly of himself and often looked down on some of the big shots of the Jianghu. As a result, he was ruthlessly beaten in the face and taught a lesson. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to survive until now. It's just that I didn't expect this matter to be related to the Elysium. Yang Gongdu has really kicked an iron plate. The people of the Elysium never follow the rules." Chu Xiao asked curiously, "What kind of existence is the Elysium?" "In the past, when the Kunlun devil cult was at its peak, we were also unable to completely drive the heavenly gate off the Kunlun mountain?" Chu Wuji shook his head and said, "To be honest, I don't know what kind of existence the Elysium is. Senior Wei should know a little, but it's very vague. The people of the Elysium are powerful, but there's some kind of taboo for them to step out of the Elysium. It seems that only one person can step out of the Elysium every once in a while. Of course, there are times when 2 or more people can step out, but it's very rare. The existence of the Elysium seems to have some kind of mission. As long as you don't conflict with the people of the Elysium on this mission, you don't have to worry about the Elysium finding trouble with you. Just like Chu Kuanga's death. If Chu Kuanga hadn't taken the initiative to stop the people of the Elysium from snatching the treasure, he wouldn't have died." However, Chu Wuji then sneered and said, "As for the fact that the holy cult didn't dominate the West Kunlun mountain range 500 years ago, that was purely because the people of the Elysium were pasting gold on their faces. Many people of the hidden devil clan knew about those secrets. Back then, Patriarch Dugu wanted to drive the people of the Elysium away. He even barged into the Elysium alone. Patriarch Dugu killed 8 of the Elysium 9 divine generals of that generation, and crippled 1. In the end, Patriarch Dugu fought with the leader of the Elysium sect of that generation, and almost shattered half of the Elysium sect. The leader of the Elysium sect of that generation was beaten until he admitted defeat and took the initiative to let Patriarch Dugu enter the Elysium. However, for some unknown reason, after Patriarch Dugu entered the Elysium sect, he didn't continue to drive the half-crippled Elysium sect out of Kunlun Mountain. Instead, he left and gave a piece of land to the Elysium sect. He told the disciples of the holy cult not to continue to attack the Elysium sect. The leader of the Elysium sect of that generation died on the 2nd day after the incident. The only survivor of the 9 divine generals, who was also the crippled one, became the leader of the Elysium sect. He sealed the mountain for 100 years and only reopened it after the holy cult was destroyed. Gradually, people started to step into the martial world and started to boast that even when the Kunlun devil cult was at its peak, the Elysium sect wasn't afraid and could even stand up to them. They didn't know that if it wasn't for Patriarch Dugu showing mercy, the Elysium sect would have been destroyed 8 times over. The current leader of the Elysium sect, Jun Wuxian, is an amazing person. He is the grand disciple of the guy who survived from the hands of Patriarch Dugu. In the past, when he was at his peak, he even wanted to fight for the position of number 1 in the world. Unfortunately, before he could realize this ambition, he was defeated by Zhong Shenxiu and went to cultivate in seclusion. Chu Xiao nodded in understanding. It seemed that although the Elysium sect was mysterious, their strength wasn't too exaggerated. Otherwise, the one who ended the Kunlun devil cult and dominated the martial world wouldn't have been Ning Xuanji, but the leader of the Elysium sect of that generation. Chu Wuji said in a deep voice, "All right, let's not talk about these messy things first. Why did you ask me to come this time?" Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "It's very simple. I want to ask about the attitude of the hidden devil lineage. If I'm not wrong, in the next 1 or 2 days, what happened in the Guanzhong torture room and my identity will spread throughout the martial world. At that time, there will definitely be people who won't let it go and watch me. Or rather, the hidden devil lineage will control the Guanzhong torture room. I've sowed a lot of karma. If it's only people of the same generation who come to find trouble with me, I'm not afraid even if Zhongxian brings people here. But Senior Chu, you also know that for those on the righteous path, they never have to follow any rules when dealing with us, the demons of the demonic path. I killed Zhan Yongzi and severely injured Su Xing of the Great Light Temple. This time, I'm afraid the reaction of the large sects is obvious. Although I'm arrogant, I'm not to the extent of being conceited. Now that things have become so big, if I don't have the support of the hidden devil lineage, then I can only conceal my identity and keep a low profile for a while. Chu Wuji raised his eyebrows and said, "You mean that you want the hidden devil lineage to help you resist the experts of the large sects?" Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "Not only me, but the entire hidden devil lineage as well. Now that I've completely stabilized the Guanzhong torture room and temporarily control it, I'll leave the Guanzhong torture room. This place is located between the 3 countries. Although its geographical location is sensitive, it's extremely important. If this place becomes the hidden devil lineage's stronghold, it'll be extremely important for the hidden devil lineage's future development. They can quickly advance and retreat from the 3 countries. On the other hand, if the hidden devil lineage doesn't want the Guanzhong torture room, then I can only leave to protect my life." Chu Wuji smiled and said, "Chu Xiao boy, you don't have to provoke me. Don't think that your position is so low, and don't think that the entire hidden devil lineage is so weak. After you entered the Devil Sky Realm last time, no matter what the other people of the hidden devil lineage think, you're already the successor of the hidden devil lineage, the strongest of the younger generation of the hidden devil lineage. Now that your identity has been exposed, the hidden devil lineage will not ignore it. Even if not everyone will help you, Senior Wei still has some old friends of the Devil Dao experts, enough to help you block those people. You've only offended a few sects, not the entire Jianghu. This cause and effect the hidden devil lineage can bear." Hearing Chu Wuji's promise, Chu Xiao was not excited. Instead, he frowned and said, "But there are other problems. If the hidden devil lineage is mobilized on a large scale because of me, will it attract the fear of the righteous Dao sects? Will it cause another war between the righteous Dao and the demonic Dao? After all, last time I used the identity of Lin Yi, I've already caused a lot of trouble." Chu Wuji chuckled and said, "It's because you caused such a big commotion last time, and the major sects did not react too intensely. That's why Senior Wei is confident that those sects will not launch another righteous Dao and devil war. The price of a righteous Dao and devil war is too high. Even the last time at Floating Jade Mountain was not considered a large-scale righteous Dao and devil war. Moreover, my hidden devil lineage has been hiding underground for hundreds of years, but no one said that my hidden devil lineage is destined to be a rat underground for life." Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "In that case, I know what to do. Thank you, Senior Chu, and thank Senior Wei for me." Chu Xiao spent a lot of effort to obtain the power of the Guanzhong torture room. Now, if Chu Xiao gave up, he could only guarantee that he could take away the Ghost Hand King and other confidants. The other warriors of the Guanzhong torture room would definitely not leave with him. It was very important for Chu Xiao to be able to preserve this power. More importantly, as long as Chu Xiao could survive this calamity, the hidden devil lineage would no longer have to hide underground. This also meant that the hidden devil lineage finally had the tendency to completely walk out of the darkness underground. At this time, just as Chu Xiao had expected, as the news of the Guanzhong torture room spread, Crown Prince LV Longji also spread the news of Chu Xiao's identity in a rage when he learned that Yang Gongdu and Eunuch Chen had died in the Guanzhong torture room. There were also some exaggerated statements by Yang Gongdu, which instantly caused an uproar in the entire Jianghu. No one expected Chu Xiao to be Lin Yi, and Lin Yi to be Chu Xiao. Many people knew that a large number of the hidden devil lineage members were hidden in the Jianghu. However, the fake identity of the first on the Longhu list was actually the second on the Longhu list. This was too ironic. Ever since the wind-sweeping tower established the Longhu list, there had been outstanding figures on both the Longhu list and the list at the same time. Now, Zhang Chengzhen was one of them. However, Chu Xiao was the first person to occupy 2 rankings at the same time. It would be more or less accurate to say that this was unprecedented. For most people in the Jianghu, this matter was something new and interesting to them. However, for those from the big sects who had a grudge against Chu Xiao or Lin Yi, as well as some other famous warriors on the list, They were all furious after hearing the news. Chu Xiu made them feel like they had been fooled. Chapter 637. Ever since the Kunlun demon sect was annihilated, although the demonic path was on the decline, there were still quite a number of powerful demonic overlords. These people relied on their own strength to stir up a storm in the pugilistic world, and the commotion they caused was actually not small. Chu Xiu's strength naturally could not be compared with those Devil Dao tycoons, but this time he caused quite a stir. He almost fooled the entire Jianghu. When Chu Xiu's identity was exposed, everyone knew that the first and second place on the Longhu list turned out to be guys from the Devil Dao. Some radical people even asked Wind Sweeping Tower to modify the Longhu list and remove the identities of Chu Xiu and Lin Yi, but they were rejected by Wind Sweeping Tower. Wind Sweeping Tower's Dragon and Tiger Storm Supreme list was the brand of Wind Sweeping Tower. This was related to Wind Sweeping Tower's reputation. It was still possible for Wind's Tower to tamper with some of the less important ranking lists. However, when it came to something that the entire world of martial arts knew, Wind's Tower would be slapping themselves in the face if they dared to tamper with it. Therefore, Wind Sweeping Tower only removed Lin Ye's name from the list, but did not remove Chu Xiu's name. He still ranked first on the Longhu list. However, although Wind Sweeping Tower did not take any action, there was already a hint of a storm in Jianghu. Wind Sweeping Tower's matter was not that simple to solve. In the Hedong County of Eastern Qi, in the Chunyang Palace of the Chunyang Dao sect, several old Taoists with white hair and beards were sitting in the hall. One of the old Taoists waved his hand, and the hot pure Yonggang Qi lit 6 incense sticks. He inserted them into the incense burner in front of the statue of ancestor Lu in the hall. The name of the Chunyang Dao sect, Lu Chunyang, was well known throughout the Jianghu. In the Taoist branch, there were only a few powerhouses who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Lu Chunyang. The furthest was the ancestor of the Celestial Master Mansion, the first Celestial Master Zhongling, and the closest was Ning Xuanji of the True Martial Arts sect. The strength of this generation of Chunyang Dao sect was not strong, and there was a faint trend of decline. However, the foundation of Chunyang Dao sect was still there. Although the strength of the younger generation was weak, there were still many experts in the older generation. The old Taoist priests in the main hall were all martial Dao masters. The old Taoist priest turned around and said in a deep voice, "Senior brothers, there are rumors that Lin Yi is Chu Xiu. This matter has already spread throughout the pugilistic world. I'm sure all of you have heard about it. Chu Xiu killed my Chunyang Dao sect's disciples in Xiaofan heaven. Even senior brother Zhen Yongzi died in his hands. He insulted my Chunyang Dao sect. This matter must not be let go. I would like to ask the few senior brothers to write a letter to the sect master to let me lead some of the Chunyang Dao sect's disciples to attack the Guanzhong torture room." This old Taoist priest was the martial Dao master of Chunyang Dao sect, Su Yongzi. He was Zhen Yongzi's junior brother and had the best relationship with Zhen Yongzi. The martial artists from Chunyang Dao sect were violent. Zhen Yongzi's death had already made them extremely angry. They even wanted to attack some of the Yinma clan's strongholds to vent their anger. However, the Chunyang Dao sect master was more rational than the other disciples and elders. He also knew that it would be a little difficult for the Chunyang Dao sect to fight against the Yinma clan alone. Even if they could get rid of some of the Yinma clan's strongholds, the other party would not be hurt. On the contrary, the Chunyang Dao sect would suffer greater damage and influence. Therefore, he did not make any move against his men. However, this time, Chu Xiu had fooled the entire pugilistic world. If the Chunyang Dao sect did not do anything, not only would they be laughed at by the entire pugilistic world, how could they face Zhen Yongzi in the netherworld? The other elders of Chunyang Dao sect were also excited when they heard that. However, at that moment, a middle-aged Taoist priest who was dressed a little sloppily opened the door. When he saw the people inside, he chuckled and said, "Martial nephews, are you having a meeting?" Su Yongzi frowned and said, "Shi Yunzi, what are you doing here?" The old Taoists present all showed awkward expressions. This guy was the most unpopular guy in the entire Chunyang Dao sect. Shi Yunzi's seniority in the Chunyang Dao sect was extremely high. He was even one generation higher than them. He could talk to the Chunyang Dao sect master and the few experts from the previous generation of Chunyang Dao sect who were near the end of their lifespans. The reason was that the previous sect master took Shi Yunzi as his last disciple before he died. In fact, Shi Yunzi did not even listen to a word of the previous sect master's teachings. Previously, everyone thought that Shi Yunzi must have some amazing talent or ability. In the end, he only stepped into the oneness of heaven and man at the age of 40. Although it was quite good, compared to the last disciple of Chunyang Dao sect, there was a huge gap between him and what they had imagined. It was fine that Shi Yunzi was weak, but Shi Yunzi always talked about seniority. He would call them martial nephews whenever he saw them. Although they were angry, there was nothing they could do. Shi Yunzi smiled and said, "Senior brother sect master said that once this matter is spread, you will definitely go to cause trouble for Chu Xiao. So, he asked me to inform you. You can go now. There's no need to disturb his closed-door cultivation." Su Yongzi immediately laughed and said, "Sect master really knows my temper. Go and tell the sect master that I will definitely get Chu Xiao's head this time. I will bring it back to the sect and offer it to senior brother Zhen Yongzi." Shi Yun shrugged and said, "I will pass on your words. However, the sect master also wanted me to pass on a message to you. This time you cannot mobilize too many people. Only the disciples of your line can go. Also this time, no matter how weak Chu Xiao's side is, Chunyang Dao sect can't make the first move. After so many years, Chunyang Dao sect has been the first bird to stand out. This time, we can't rush forward stupidly." It was unknown whether Su Yongzi heard him or not. He waved his hand and said, "Okay, go and tell the sect master that I understand." Shi Yunzi shook his head. Looking at Su Yongzi's expression, he knew that he most likely didn't hear him. "Martial nephew Su Yongzi, don't ignore the sect master's words. I see that your forehead is dark. I'm afraid this trip is going to be a bad omen." Su Yongzi snorted and said, "With your cultivation, you are going to study the Tao of divination. What can you divine? Don't say such inauspicious things." With that, Su Yongzi turned and left. Behind him, Shi Yunzi shook his head helplessly and sighed. The sect master had thought through many things during this period of seclusion, but there were many people in Chunyang Dao sect who didn't understand. At this time, Chunyang Dao sect wasn't the only one making a move. The Great Light Temple was doing the same. Previously on Mount Ba, Su Xing had been seriously injured by Chu Xiao's 7-demon blade. Since then, he had been recuperating in seclusion. This time, when he heard the news about Chu Xiao, Su Xing was so angry that he wanted to immediately lead the monk disciples of Dharma Hall to the Guanzhong torture room to seek revenge on Chu Xiao. Besides Su Xing, the master of Vajra Hall, Su Yan, and the master of Arhut Hall, Su Hong, stopped Su Xing and tried to persuade him. "It's fine if you go alone, but if you want to bring the entire Vajra Hall with you, you have to first talk to the abbot or senior brother Su Yun and get their permission, right? You are now a master of a hall. If you continue to be so willful and mischievous, the abbot might strip you of your master's position in a fit of anger." Su Xing said angrily, "The abbot is in seclusion, and senior brother Su Yun is only thinking about the big picture. What if he doesn't allow me to act? I'll act first and report later. I'll just bring people with me and act first." Su Yan and Su Hong shook their heads helplessly. Ever since Su Xing had been seriously injured by Chu Xiao's 7-demon blade on Mount Ba, the anger in his heart seemed to have grown stronger. He was irritable, easily angered, and extremely stubborn. However, Su Yan and Su Hong could only try their best to hold him back. The Great Light Temple's rules were not child's play. If Su Xing really acted recklessly, the Great Light Temple would really strip him of his Master of Vajra Hall status. Su Xing was not the only martial arts grandmaster in the Vajra Hall. The others might not have enough strength and experience, but it was not a problem for them to temporarily replace him. At this moment, a voice came from outside the door. "I say, the two of you are meddling too much. If you have a grudge, take revenge. If you have a grudge, take revenge. It's very normal. Don't be a coward, just do it. Junior brother Su Xing, I support you." The two of them looked up and saw the Kongji Zen Hall's master, Su Du, who was dressed in a sloppy monk robe and sipping from a wine gourd. He looked like he was watching a good show. Su Yan said angrily, "Senior brother Su Du, can you not add fuel to the fire here? And why are you secretly drinking again? No, you actually dare to drink openly in front of us. I'm going to report this to senior brother Su Yun." Su Du waved the wine gourd in his hand and said, "Junior brother Su Yan, you've gone overboard again. Who said that the wine gourd must contain wine? It's just sugar water. There's not a single thing in the first place, so how can there be dust? You have wine in your heart, so when you see the wine gourd, you think it's wine. I have no wine in my heart. Even if I drink wine, it's just cold water. Su Yan and Su Hong looked helpless. They could not be bothered to argue with Su Du, so they pulled Su Xing back.
However, at this moment, a young monk came in and reported, "Masters, the chief of the memorial villa near Renlong is here to see you."
The few of them looked at each other. Even Su Xing stopped struggling, and a look of confusion appeared in his eyes. What was Nie Renlong doing at the Great Light Temple? In the past, people from other sects had come to the Great Light Temple, but most of them were from sects that were related to the Buddhist sections. Although the memorial villa was also in the northern Yen, it did not have much interaction with the Great Light Temple. Nie Renlong had never been there before. Su Du leaned against the doorframe and said lazily, "Since he's here to see you, let him in first. Otherwise, people will say that the Great Light Temple is lacking in etiquette." The little monk nodded his head and immediately brought Nie Renlong inside. In less than a year, Nie Renlong seemed to have aged more than a decade. His hair was completely white, and his body exuded a cold aura. After seeing Su Du and the others, Nie Renlong did not say anything. He knelt on the ground under everyone's shocked gazes and said in a low voice, "The demon scoundrel Chu Xiao has wreaked havoc in the martial world and is lawless. I implore the Great Light Temple to uphold justice and join forces with the righteous martial world to kill the demon and restore order to the world." Chapter 638. When Nie Renlong knelt, Su Xing and the others were shocked. They did not expect Nie Renlong to do this. Although the Great Guangming Temple was powerful, a martial Dao Grandmaster was still a martial Dao Grandmaster. Nie Renlong, as the chief of the Morgue Villa, was also a figure on the Feng Yun list. Yet, he had knelt down in front of them. Even Su Du was stunned. Su Yan quickly helped Nie Renlong up and said, "Villa leader Nie, you don't have to do this. It is the Great Light Temple's duty to exterminate demons and defend justice. We can't afford to do this." Nie Renlong did not stand up. Instead, he shook his head and said, "This time, I'm not only here for the underworld, but also for myself. My poor child, Dong Lu, died tragically in the hands of Chu Xiao. As his father, I can't even find a real target for revenge. How sad and ironic. This time, Chu Xiao's identity has been exposed, and he has incurred the wrath of the people. This person is bold and ruthless. In the future, he will definitely become the leader of the demonic path and bring chaos to the underworld. If I don't kill him now, I'm afraid I won't be able to take revenge in this lifetime. However, the strength of the Morgue village is weak, and Chu Xiao is a rising talent of the hidden demons. He will definitely be protected by the hidden demons. If I want to kill him, it will be extremely difficult." Su Yan frowned and said, "So, Villa leader Nie, you want the Great Light Temple to avenge you?" Nie Renlong shook his head and said, "That's not what I mean. My own vengeance should naturally be avenged by myself. I want to ask the Great Light Temple to uphold justice. I want to use the Great Light Temple's reputation to form a demonic slaying alliance in the northern Yen to kill that villain Chu Xiao together. Chu Xiao is extremely ruthless in the underworld. If we don't kill him now, he will definitely be a great threat to the righteous path in the future. However, the strength of the Morgue village is too weak. If we rashly say something like forming an alliance, I'm afraid people will laugh at us. So, I came to ask the Great Light Temple for help.
I am willing to serve the Great Light Temple as the leader of the alliance and command all the righteous path powerhouses in the northern Yen martial world to attack the Guanzhong torture room and destroy that murderer."
Su Yan and the others frowned. They did not expect Nie Renlong to say something like this. To be honest, after Chu Xiao's matter, the Great Guangming Temple would definitely want to settle the grudges between them. After all, there were more than one Great Light Temple martial warriors who had died in Chu Xiao. However, regardless of whether it was Su Xing, Su Yan, or the others who wanted to seek revenge on Chu Xiao, none of them had expected Nie Renlong to make such a big deal out of it. Su thought and said, "Nye Lord Yen I have to say. I Yen leader I Yen temple I not. I. Villa Lord Nye, you can wait first. We will be back soon." Nie Renlong nodded and stood up. He followed a disciple of the Great Light Temple to the guest hall. After Nie Renlong left, Su Yan said, "Let's go. Let's talk to senior brother Su Yun about this." The few of them nodded.
Just as they were about to leave, Su Du suddenly laughed and said, "That Nie Renlong is not a simple guy.
He talks about killing demons, but he has an inner demon in his heart." Su Yan and the others did not care about Su Du's words. In the Temple of Great Light, Su Du was always behaving irrationally and acting like a lunatic. After a long time, no one took his words seriously. Usually, no one would go to Su Du to discuss serious matters. When the few of them arrived outside Su Yun's temple, they knocked on the door respectfully. They only entered the temple after receiving permission. Their attitude was as respectful as the abbot. At that moment, Su Yun was holding a scripture in the temple. He was reading it while drinking tea under the Bodhi tree. Seeing that everyone had come, Su Yun said, "It's rare for so many of you to come. Did something big happen? Also, Su Du, pour away the wine in your gourd. If I see you breaking the rules in the temple again, you will have to clean the toilets for a month." Su Du's expression changed and he quickly said, "Senior brother Su Yun, you misunderstood. How is this wine? It's just sugar water," the Buddha said. Before Su Du could finish, Su Yun raised his hand and interrupted him. "Didn't the Buddha say why the sugar water in your gourd tastes exactly the same as the osmanthus wine?" Su Yan glared at Su Du angrily. He had thought that Su Du's gourd was filled with sugar water. Su Du smiled embarrassedly and poured out the osmanthus wine in his gourd. However, he then touched his bald head and felt that something was wrong. If senior brother Su Yun had never drunk wine before, how could he smell that the wine in his gourd was osmanthus wine? However, at that moment, Su Yan could no longer care about these messy matters. He told Su Yun about Nie Renlong's situation. Su Yun did not express his stance. Instead, he asked Su Yan, "What do you think the Great Light Temple should do about this?" Su Yan thought about it and said, "We should agree to Nie Renlong's request. Our Temple of Great Light has a grudge against Chu Xiu to begin with, and the lurking devil faction will probably take this opportunity to make a name for themselves. It would be good to take this opportunity to kill the lurking devil faction's spirit." Su Yun said calmly, "It's not wrong to agree. If Nie Renlong wants to form an alliance, it's fine. However, the Great Light Temple will not be the so-called alliance leader." Su Yan said strangely, "Why? In the entire northern Yan martial world, besides the Great Light Temple, who else is qualified to be the alliance leader? Moreover, this matter can increase the reputation of the Great Light Temple in the northern Yan martial world. Why not?" Su Yun shook his head and said, "Even if the Great Light Temple is not the alliance leader, we are still the leader of the Northern Yen Buddhist sect. Will this affect our reputation? On the contrary, if there is a deviation in this matter, it will affect the reputation of the Great Light Temple. Therefore, if the Great Light Temple joins the alliance, Nie Renlong can use the reputation of the Great Light Temple to increase the reputation of the alliance. However, we will not be the alliance leader." Su Yan said doubtfully, "There is a deviation? The exposure of Chu Xiu's identity has already incurred the wrath of the heavens and the people. How can there be a deviation?" Su Yun said faintly, "Nothing in this world is absolute. It's never wrong to think about defeat before victory. Moreover, don't think that the hidden demon clan is too weak. If they were really weak, they wouldn't have survived until now. This time, you will lead a portion of the elite disciples of the 6 martial institutions. Su Xing will stay in the Great Light Temple for closed-door training." "Why?" Su Xing could not help but ask. He had the greatest grudge with Chu Xiu. After being injured twice, he wanted to swallow Chu Xiu alive. In the end, he finally had an honorable opportunity, but Su Yun did not let him do it. Su Yun looked at Su Xing and did not say a word. However, his deep eyes seemed to be able to see through Su Xing's heart. It made Su Xing feel a chill from head to toe. He did not dare to say another word. After a long while, Su Yun said indifferently, "The anger in your heart has been completely aroused by Chu Xiu's demonic saber, and your mental state is even on the verge of becoming a demon. How are you going to go in such a situation? It's fine if you want to seek death, but don't bring the disciples of the Great Light Temple to seek death." Su Xing lowered his head after hearing Su Yun's words. He did not dare to say another word. After Su Xing, Su Yan, and Su Hong left, Su Du said with a rare serious expression. Senior brother, why did you agree to that guy Nie Renlong? This person has a guilty conscience.
He keeps saying that he wants to get rid of evil for the martial world, that he wants to take revenge for his son. But in reality, as long as the alliance succeeds, whether it is my Great Light Temple or Nie Renlong who becomes the alliance leader, as the organizer and initiator, his memorial manor will obtain the greatest reputation.
Su Yun leaned against the Bodhi tree behind him and said calmly, everyone has an evil spirit in their heart. It may be greed, anger, or obsession. Instead of caring about whether others have ulterior motives, it is better to subdue one's own heart demon. Whatever Nie Renlong wants to do has nothing to do with our Temple of Great Light.
Whatever he obtains has nothing to do with our Temple of Great Light either.
What our Temple of Great Light is concerned about is whether our Temple of Great Light has suffered losses in this matter. It's that simple. Su Du shook his head, turned around, and walked out of Su Yun's temple. As he walked, he said, it is too tiring to play mind games with you people. Buddha said, can't people be more simple? Behind him, Su Yun closed his eyes and said, only in the chaotic world can one cultivate the heart. We can be simple, but the result is that we don't even have the money to gild our Buddha's body. We don't even have enough to feed our disciples. At that moment in the guest room, when Nie Renlong received the Great Light Temple's reply, his eyes were filled with joy, but he forcefully suppressed it. Su Du's guess was right. Nie Renlong did not come to the Great Light Temple purely to get rid of evil in the martial world. He was not that noble. Taking revenge for his son was one reason, but the more important reason was that he wanted the memorial manor to regain its glory in the martial world. During the time when Nie Donglu died, Nie Renlong had been heavily injured and turned into a demon. He was almost disheartened. However, he was an ambitious person after all. He used a year to gradually walk out of his depression. He had lost his son, but he still had the memorial manor. In the future, the memorial manor would go down in the history of the martial world. As the first villa master of the memorial manor, his name would also be known in the martial world for tens of thousands of years. Therefore he formed the alliance this time. 30% of it was to kill Chu Xiu for revenge, and 70% was to raise the reputation of the memorial manor to another level. After receiving the Great Light Temple's reply, Nie Renlong immediately began to spread the news of the alliance in the northern Yan martial world. In an instant, many people responded. Almost at the same time, there were people in eastern Qi who thought of the same idea as Nie Renlong. They formed an alliance to kill Chu Xiu for revenge and for their reputation. That force was the Xiahou clan. Chapter 639. Among the people that Chu Xiu had offended, most of them were from eastern Qi and northern Yan. On the contrary, there were not many from western Chu. This was especially so for the Xiahou clan. Not only had Chu Xiu killed Xiahou Zhan's only son with the identity of Lin Yi, but he had also killed many of the Xiahou clan's young disciples. Chu Xiu had also killed Xiahou Zhan's trusted subordinates with his original identity. This hatred was not small, but Xiahou Zhan also knew that it would not be easy to get rid of Chu Xiu with his own strength. The Xiahou clan did not belong to him alone. If he wanted to touch Chu Xiu, he would first have to consider whether someone from the Yinma clan would stand up to stop him. Therefore, the simplest way was to form an alliance and gather the strength of the entire Eastern Qi martial arts world to get rid of Chu Xiu. However, compared to the northern Yan land, the alliance led by the Xiahou clan was slower and weaker. After all, the Xiahou clan had to persuade some Eastern Qi martial arts world forces to help. Moreover, some of those forces were not convinced that the Xiahou clan would be the leader of the alliance. On the other hand, the northern Yan side was much smoother. Although Nie Renlong was not the strongest in the northern Yan martial arts world, it was undeniable that Nie Renlong's reputation in the northern Yan martial arts world was much stronger than that of the Xiahou clan in eastern Qi. Most importantly, at the beginning when Nie Renlong was preparing to establish the alliance, most of the warriors had a wait-and-see attitude. There were even some who were a little disdainful. Nie Renlong indeed had some fame, but the overall strength of the Morgue village was not strong. If he wanted to be the leader of this alliance, he was afraid that it would not be enough. However, after the people from the Great Light Temple took the initiative to join the alliance, this group of people no longer held back and even rushed to join the alliance. After all, the status of the Great Light Temple was not comparable to the Morgue village. Even the Great Light Temple was in the alliance, so why should others be reserved? On the other hand, the Xiahou clan was not so lucky. Although there was also a Chunyang Dao sect in eastern Qi, the relationship between the Xiahou clan and Chunyang Dao sect was not good. Moreover, Chunyang Dao sect did things in a straightforward manner and did not like to play tricks. At this time, in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu was not cultivating. Instead, he was closely watching the news coming from the outside.
Whether it was the Memorial Village or the Xiahou clan, the alliance of the Xiahou clan or Northern Yanland, the Gu clan, or the Xiahou clan had formed an alliance, they were so powerful that there was no need to hide it at all.
The Ghost Hand Lord and other Chu Xiu clan side was Chu Xiu clan's Xiu clan. They were already mentally prepared. Their lord's ability to attract hatred was so great. Now that his identity was exposed, there would be no way to resolve this peacefully. There would definitely be many people coming to seek revenge. However, their preparations were to come one after another. Who would have thought that this group of people would make such a big move? They directly formed a powerful alliance in the northern Yan and eastern Qi land, and assumed the posture of attacking the Guanzhong torture room by force. The Ghost Hand Lord and the others were panicking, but Chu Xiu, who was sitting in the main seat, was very calm. In the Guanzhong torture room, are there already people preparing to escape? Chu Xiu suddenly asked. The Ghost Hand Lord hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "Indeed, but Lord, all the warriors from the Guanxi land did not escape. Those who escaped were almost all warriors from the other 3 lands. Among them, the Guannan land had the most people. The Guannan penal officer was Yin Batong, who had just been publicly executed by Chu Xiu on a groundless charge. Therefore, among the 4 places in Guanzhong, the Guannan land was the most resistant to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "In the face of a great enemy, it's good for some unstable people to leave. They won't get in the way. Don't worry." Mei Qinglian said, "There's no need to worry about them. You should worry about yourself first. The Eastern Qi and the Northern Yan martial arts world are preparing to form an alliance to suppress you. How are you going to stop them? Even if Senior Wei and the others can help you stop those people, they can't stop all of them. If not, you'd better hide in some secret places of the Yinma clan and wait for the storm to pass before coming out." Mei Qinglian's words were for Chu Xiu's own good. She didn't expect that the Jianghu would be so chaotic. It was as if the Guanzhong torture room was going to be completely destroyed. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "It's easy to hide. But if I hide, the foundation of the Guanzhong torture room will be in vain. Besides, if I choose to hide, I won't have a chance to step out into the Jianghu in a short period of time. I have to bear this disaster by myself." Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "But how are you going to bear it? Even if you reach the level of martial arts grandmaster, you can't stop the simultaneous attack of the Eastern Qi and the Northern Yan alliances." Chu Xiu stood up and said in a low voice, "But why do I have to wait until they come to my door before I think of a defensive strategy? Waiting for death and facing the attacks of 2 alliances at the same time is no different from courting death." As his voice trailed off, Chu Xiu said to Ghost Hand Lord in a low voice, "Go, select all the elites of the Guanzhong torture room, and then select 1,000 absolutely loyal martial artists. Tang Ya and Yen Bugue will lead them to the Northern Yan. At the same time, you will guard the Guanzhong torture room. If anything happens, immediately send someone to contact me. At the same time, hand these secret letters to these people." Chu Xiu threw a few secret letters to Ghost Hand Lord. Mei Qinglian didn't see what was written on them. She frowned and said, "What are you going to do? Also, who are these secret letters intended for?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "I've said it before. Sitting and waiting for death isn't my style. Rather than waiting for those 2 clans to form an alliance and attack us, I might as well take the initiative and destroy one of the alliances first. These secret letters are my connections. Don't think that I, Chu Xiu, have enemies all over Jianghu. There is more than one person who is willing to help me in this critical moment." Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with her mouth agape. She really didn't expect this move. When faced with such a predicament, most people would either think of defense or escape. In the end, Chu Xiu was bold enough to go against the current and counterattack. She didn't know whether to say that Chu Xiu was bold or that Chu Xiu was arrogant. Chu Xiu turned to Mei Qinglian and said, "Saintess, please send a message to Senior Wei and ask him to help me stop the people from the Great Light Temple. The morgue is in the Northern Yen Alliance. Although it's far from the Great Light Temple, with the Great Light Temple's strength and status in the Northern Yen Alliance, I reckon that when I bring people to the Northern Yen Alliance, we will be noticed by the people from the Great Light Temple. I'm not afraid of other people, but if the Great Light Temple's 3 main meditation hall seats come, I won't be able to stop them. Also, help me find Shang Tianyao. Mei Qinglian asked curiously, why are you looking for Shang Tianyao? 9 Abandonment Sword. Shang Tianyao was a martial arts master of the Yinma faction. However, his current identity was a high official of the Northern Yen royal family. He had also helped Chu Xiu to stop Nieren Long. However, to be honest, although Shang Tianyao's strength was not considered weak, he was not too strong either. It was not very meaningful for Chu Xiu to find him. Moreover, although Shang Tianyao was also a member of the Yinma clan, he was not a member of Wei Shuya's clan. In the Yinma clan, he did not belong to anyone. He was just a rogue cultivator and a Devil Dao Grand Master. The last time he helped Chu Xiu was to give face to Mei Qinglian. It was just a harmless help. However, if he were to help Chu Xiu this time, he would have to face a large group of martial arts masters. Shang Tianyao most likely would not take the risk. Chu Xiu understood what Mei Qinglian meant. He said in a deep voice, "Of course I'm not going to find Shang Tianyao for help. I just want to see someone through Shang Tianyao. Since Nie Renlong knows to borrow the Great Light Temple's power, do you think I don't know how to borrow power?" Mei Qinglian was surprised. "Whose power do you want to borrow?" "The Northern Yen Imperial Court." Although the Jianghu and the Imperial Court often cooperated, most of the time they were on opposing sides. This was especially true for the Northern Yen Imperial Court's actions over the years. There were many articles that could be written about it. Mei Qinglian looked deeply into Chu Xiu's eyes and said, "I hope you are confident this time, and not gambling." Chu Xiu said plainly, "How can there be anything in this world that can be 100% confident? No matter how stable something is, there will always be some variables. In fact, people are gambling every moment of their lives. It's just that I believe that I can win." Regardless of whether Chu Xiu was gambling or just being overconfident, Mei Qinglian was already tied to Chu Xiu's chariot. She could only do as Chu Xiu said. She contacted Wei Shuya and helped Chu Xiu contact Shang Tianyao. For Shang Tianyao, if Mei Qinglian really wanted him to expose his identity and help Chu Xiu fight against Nie Renlong's Northern Yen Demon-Slaying Alliance, Shang Tianyao would probably decline. However, since Mei Qinglian only wanted to help Chu Xiu introduce the Northern Yen Emperor, he could still fulfill this small request. Furthermore, Shang Tianyao was smart enough not to introduce Chu Xiu himself. After all, his identity was sensitive. If he were to introduce Chu Xiu, who was a member of the demonic Dao, who was in the eye of the storm, it would be easy to expose his identity. He was prepared to introduce Chu Xiu to the Northern Yen Emperor through the 13th Prince, Xiang Chong. The 13th Prince had once wanted to recruit Chu Xiu, but unfortunately, Chu Xiu did not agree. But when he saw Chu Xiu this time, Xiang Chong was very excited. "Brother Chu, have you thought it through and decided to work for me?" Chu Xiu retorted, "Could it be that your highness doesn't know my identity? Now, I'm being hunted down by the righteous martial artists. There are countless people in this world who want me dead." Xiang Chong laughed. "Righteous path? Demonic path? So what? In my eyes, there are only those who can help me and those who can't. As long as Brother Chu agrees to help me, I will do my best to protect you." Xiang Chong looked at Chu Xiu sincerely. If it was anyone else, they would definitely be touched by Xiang Chong's expression. This Prince of Yen could be said to be a model of being courteous. Even though Chu Xiu was in so much trouble, he was still prepared to protect Chu Xiu. However, in actual fact, most of what these guys from the royal family said was false. It was the same for the 13th Prince, the Prince of Yen. Chapter 640. Extraordinary people naturally had their own extraordinary points. Xiang Chong, the 13th Prince, would shine brightly in the battle for the throne of Northern Yen in the future. Compared to the Xiang Chong of the past, Xiang Chong now appeared to be much more mature and experienced. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "I appreciate your highness's good intentions. However, since my identity has been exposed, then your highness should know that it is impossible for me to rely on others. Moreover, Even if I really rely on your highness, would your highness really dare to use me? Xiang Chong laughed dryly. Chu Xiu was right. Even if Chu Xiu really relied on him, Xiang Chong would not dare to use Chu Xiu without worry. Diabolism was diabolism after all. Who would dare to rely on someone from diabolism as a confidant? Xiang Chong coughed and said, I wonder why Brother Chu is looking for me this time? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I would like your highness, Prince of Yen, to introduce me. I would like to see his majesty. See father? Xiang Chong could not help but frown. Among the many sons of the Northern Yen Emperor Xianglong, although Xiang Chong was not the strongest, he was the most favored one. It was actually a very simple matter for him to let Xianglong see Chu Xiu. However, at this critical juncture, Chu Xiu had come to secretly seek an audience with the Northern Yen Emperor. This was too sensitive and Xiang Chong did not dare to act rashly. Chu Xiu said plainly, Your Highness, don't worry. This is the capital of Northern Yen. I came alone. There are countless experts in the palace. Are you still worried that I will harm His Majesty? Moreover, you don't have to worry that I will speak nonsense. In front of His Majesty, even if I am from the Yinma clan, I will not speak nonsense. Your Highness has helped me this time. I will remember this favor and will definitely return it in the future. Chu Xiu's last sentence moved Xiang Chong. In fact, Xiang Chong really didn't care whether Chu Xiu belonged to the righteous path or the demonic path. As a member of the imperial court, although their attitudes towards the righteous path and the demonic path were somewhat different, the core was the same, vigilance and use. Chu Xiu was now famous. As the most outstanding warrior of the younger generation of the Hidden Devil bloodline, he represented some of the power of the Hidden Devil bloodline. It would not be a bad thing if he could get a favor from him in the future. Therefore Xiang Chong thought for a moment and said, Sure, but Brother Chu, father's temper isn't that good. You'd better watch your words. Chu Xiu nodded. Of course, he knew that Xianglong's temper wasn't good. It would be strange if a ruler who could lead the Northern Yen to counterattack a powerful country like Eastern Qi had a good temper. For hours after Xiang Chong left, an old eunuch led Chu Xiu into the imperial city through a small gate. After all, Chu Xiu's identity was somewhat special. It was somewhat inappropriate for a diabolist to openly enter the imperial city through the gate. Chu Xiu had seen the imperial palace of Eastern Qi. Of course, it was only the periphery, but it was very magnificent. Compared to the imperial palace of Eastern Qi, the Northern Yen imperial palace lacked some luxurious decorations, but it was more dignified and solemn. The entire Northern Yen imperial palace was built in dark colors. The grayish-black ground and the pitch-black palace made people feel slightly depressed. However, the Northern Yen imperial palace was still dark, so it was normal to build the imperial palace like this. Even among the Northern Yen imperial family, even the dragon robes were black in the past, and they worshipped the black dragon. Later, he heard from some necromancers that dragons were respected by the nine-clawed golden dragon. That was why the Northern Yen imperial family changed their dragon robes to gold. Chu Xiu followed the old eunuch to a side hall, where Xiang Chong was already waiting. The lights in the side hall were dim, making the atmosphere even more depressing. At the top sat an old man wearing a dragon robe and a black dragon-patterned blanket. This person was the Northern Yen Emperor, the one who had once joined forces to counterattack Eastern Qi with the power of a weak country, Xianglong. If one only looked at his appearance, Xianglong was actually very ordinary, to the point that if he did not wear the dragon robe, he would be an ordinary old man. However, as he opened his squinted eyes, they bloomed with a sharpness like the edge of a knife. In all fairness, among the three emperors of the current world, Xianglong was the most outstanding one. The Western Chu imperial family was content in a corner, and some of the members of the imperial family did not engage in proper business. Some liked martial arts, and some liked witchcraft and other miscellaneous things. Therefore, in terms of national strength, Western Chu had never been considered strong. Of course, this was also due to the terrain of Western Chu. And the Eastern Qi emperor, Lu Haochong, was famous for being incompetent. Other than living a relatively long life, he had almost no redeeming qualities. Of course, as an emperor, Lu Haochong could not be said to be muddle-headed. He could only be said to be a little lacking in ability. And this Northern Yen emperor, Xianglong, was recognized by the world as a hero of the current age. Eastern Qi was located in the Central Plains, with a vast territory and abundant resources. At that time, Western Chu was a small country in the south, and Northern Yen was a small country in the north. In any case, in the eyes of Eastern Qi, they were both small countries. At the most serious time, Northern Yen was almost destroyed by Eastern Qi. Until Xianglong ascended the throne, he forgot to eat and sleep in the early stage, keeping a low profile and patiently developing the national strength. Later on, he joined forces with the Northern Yen martial artists to counterattack Eastern Qi. Yang Gongdu was in charge of these matters in the past. In the end, the behemoth Eastern Qi was defeated by the Northern Yen. Even the Wei Kingdom, which was attached to Eastern Qi, was swallowed by the Northern Yen and became Wei County. If not for the fact that the Northern Yen's foundation was too weak to support a long-range attack on Eastern Qi, Northern Yen might have already become the overlord of the Central Plains. At this time, Xianglong was also looking at Chu Xiao. Rather than saying he was looking, it was more like he was sizing him up. Chu Xiao cupped his hands at Xianglong and greeted, "Greetings, Your Majesty." With a light snort, Xianglong said in a deep voice, "Why are you not kneeling before me?" Chu Xiao replied, "I am not a subject of the Yen Kingdom. Why should I kneel before its king?" Xianglong snorted, "I heard that you, Chu Xiao, are from the Yen Kingdom. What, just because you have some power and background, you don't care about your own country anymore?" Chu Xiao smiled and said, "Your Majesty, I am afraid you have misunderstood. I only made a name for myself in the Yen Kingdom, but I am not a citizen of the Yen Kingdom. To be precise, I am from Wei County, the Wei County that Your Majesty destroyed. Of course, with my identity, I have long lost my home and country. People say that the demonic path is arrogant and perverse, and I am indeed so. Other than the masters who taught me, I don't even bow to the heavens or the earth." Xianglong laughed coldly. "Don't even bow to the heavens or the earth? You encouraged Xiangchong to bring you to me because you want to use the power of the Northern Yen court to help you fend off this disaster. In the end, you can't even kneel to me. You are an arrogant and rude person. Why should I help you?" Chu Xiao said lightly, "Your Majesty, you have misunderstood. I am actually not used to asking for help. In this world, any debt can be repaid, but a debt of gratitude is the most difficult. Moreover, the things that I ask for are not necessarily stable. What I like is cooperation, mutual benefit. With benefits in hand, everyone will contribute and no one will lose out." Xianglong was so angry that he laughed. "What a joke! You, Chu Xiao, a junior, dare to come and talk to me about cooperation? Do you think you are qualified to talk to me about cooperation? If it were Wei Shuya of the Yinma clan, it would be more like it. Do you know how much official business I have to deal with every day and how much national affairs I have to think about? You, a junior, came here to waste my time. Do you know what crime it is to deceive the emperor? Or do you think that because you are from the Yinma clan, I dare not kill you?" As he shouted the last word, the aura and killing intent that bloomed from Xianglong's body made even Chu Xiao's heart turn cold. In fact, Xianglong did not have much cultivation in martial arts. For a person of royal birth like him, he might be able to cultivate when he was a prince, but after he ascended to the throne, where would he find the time to cultivate? He could only treat martial arts as something to strengthen his body, supplemented by some elixirs and other things to extend his lifespan. However, because he had to deal with official business every day, he worked too hard, so his lifespan could not be extended by much. On the other hand, mediocre people like Eastern Qi Lu Hao Chong had less to worry about and lived longer. In terms of strength, Chu Xiao could easily take Xianglong's life with a light flick of his finger. However, Xianglong had fought all over the world, and the number of people who had died by his hand was uncountable. These emperors were the ones who had the most blood on their hands. Moreover, who knew how many martial arts masters loyal to the Northern Yen royal family were lying in ambush around this spacious hall? If Chu Xiao dared to act rashly, he would be the first to die. Chu Xiao said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Although I am a junior in the Yinma clan, my words still carry some weight. Moreover, I know what Your Majesty needs. The people who want to kill me this time are the same kind of people that Your Majesty wants to kill." Xianglong suddenly put away the anger on his face, as if the murderous person just now was not him. He asked calmly, "What do you mean?" Chu Xiao cupped his hands and said, "In the past, Your Majesty joined forces with the Northern Yan martial artists to fight against the Eastern Qi. It was a brilliant move. Martial arts had no national boundaries, but martial arts sects did. Once the Eastern Qi destroyed the Northern Yan martial artists would inevitably be suppressed by the Eastern Qi martial artists. With the joint forces of the court and the martial artists, we finally counterattacked the Eastern Qi. This is the most outstanding achievement since Your Majesty ascended the throne. Xianglong's face softened a little. After all, what Chu Xiu said was his proudest achievement. For so many years, from the founding of the Northern Yan to the generation before Xianglong, the Northern Yan had always been suppressed by the Eastern Qi. It was not until his generation that the Northern Yan turned the tables and counterattacked the Eastern Qi, even causing the Eastern Qi to suffer a great loss. Although the Northern Yan was still not on par with the Eastern Qi in terms of foundation, it was widely acknowledged that the Northern Yan was already a superpower that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Eastern Qi. But Chu Xiu then said, "But Your Majesty should have noticed the repercussions of that battle." The imperial court joined forces with the martial artists to fight against the Eastern Qi, but after the battle, many benefits were distributed to the martial artists of the Northern Yan martial artists. This also caused the martial artists of the Northern Yan martial artists to be so arrogant, to the point where they have no respect for the imperial court of the Northern Yan. Your Majesty should have noticed that the Northern Yan martial artists are too big to shake off. Chapter 641. Chu Xiu had noticed the subtle relationship between the Northern Yan martial world and the Northern Yan imperial court when he was in Northern Yan. They could work together when they were facing a common enemy. But what would happen after that? Even if they did not fall out with each other, there would still be some conflicts. What the imperial court wanted was absolute control over their territories, while the forces of the martial world wanted absolute freedom. For example, sects like the Divine Martial Sect of Southern Yan, Xianglong wished that the Divine Martial Sect had the final say in the land of Southern Yan, and even the imperial court could not do anything about it. Of course, the imperial court would never tolerate such a thing. The Northern Yan martial world was a little weaker, so they did not have the Dragon Riders' imperial army, an armed force that belonged to the imperial court, like Eastern Qi. However, as a mighty ruler, Xianglong would not tolerate any provocation from the Northern Yan martial world, even if they were not powerful enough. Therefore, the Northern Yan martial world could be seen garrisoned around the counties and prefectures of the Northern Yan martial world, to prevent the martial sects of the Northern Yan martial world from going too far. However, it was also because of this that the Northern Yan martial world had to reduce their investment in the borderlands. Of course, the three kingdoms were at a stage of steady development, so it was not possible for them to fight each other for the time being. Xianglong stared at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Are you trying to say that you can help me deal with those sects of the martial world that do not obey me?" Chu Xiu, do you think I will make the same mistake twice? When the Yan kingdom was in danger, I worked with the martial world of the Yan kingdom. Although we managed to defeat Eastern Qi, it caused the martial sects of the Yan kingdom to be unable to get rid of them. Now, if I work with you fiends, I might be able to suppress these martial sects of the Yan kingdom. But, what if you take the opportunity to grow stronger? What should I do then? Drive away the wolf from the front door, and let in the tiger from the back door. In the end, the Yan kingdom will have to face a formidable enemy. When I decided to work with the martial world of the Yan kingdom, it was because things had indeed come to a critical juncture. However, the Yan kingdom has not reached that stage yet. Why should I join hands with you bunch of dangerous diabolism villains? Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty is wrong. It's safest for you to join hands with the Yinma clan because we don't have a stable stronghold. Those martial arts sects have their roots in the Northern Yan. It will be very difficult for His Majesty to completely suppress them, because their foundations are all in the Northern Yan. Your Majesty should know the situation of my Yinma lineage. My body is like floating duckweed. If His Majesty cooperates with us, we will be his blades. If the Northern Yan court gives us protection, we will kill for His Majesty. It's that simple. If Your Majesty ever gets tired of using us, you can just throw us away. You can even push all the blame onto us. The Imperial Court will still be the Imperial Court. You don't have to worry about us. We will never threaten the interests of the Northern Yan." Xiang Chong stared at Chu Xiu, dumbfounded. How could there be such conditions? Chu Xiu had actually pointed out all of his weaknesses. Wasn't he putting himself in a perilous situation? Xianglong squinted at Chu Xiao. His face was expressionless, and he couldn't see anything wrong. After a while Xianglong said, "You told me all this. Aren't you afraid that in the end, I will really abandon the Yinma lineage and even kill you? You should know that once the cunning rabbit is dead, the hound will be cooked." Chu Xiao said indifferently, "To be honest, I am afraid, but the entire Yinma lineage is not. In the past, all the righteous sects failed to kill the Yinma lineage. Although the Northern Yen court is strong, it's still not enough. And to say something taboo, if His Majesty doesn't want to use us in the future, just say the word. The Yinma lineage will have other places to go. But if His Majesty wants to be ruthless, it will only make an enemy out of nothing. In short, I came here to borrow the power of the Northern Yen court to overcome this crisis. At the same time, I am also here to hand over a knife to the Northern Yen court. With the knife of the Yinma lineage in hand, I will kill whoever His Majesty wants to kill in the future." Xianglong didn't speak. After a long silence, he suddenly chuckled and said, "You Jianghu people always like to talk about hypocritical principles. Colluding with the evil cult is the scum of the Jianghu. I wonder what the court is doing with the evil cult?" A smile also appeared on Chu Xiao's face. He knew it was a success. Can the matter of the court be called collusion? That's too unpleasant to hear. It's called enlistment. Xianglong stood up and said, "Enlistment? Very well, I don't care if they are righteous or demonic if they can be of use to me. Chu Xiao, I can help you block this crisis, but the Northern Yen court strength is limited. Although you represent the Yinma lineage, I also know that not all of the Yinma lineage's power will be on my side. So this time, the Northern Yen court will only help you within the limits of our power. We will not use our full strength, and it is impossible for us to use our full strength. If you can live, then what you just said to me will be effective. If you die, then you can only blame your own bad luck." Chu Xiao cupped his hands and said, "Rest assured, Your Majesty. There are countless people in this world who want me dead, but I am still alive and well." With that, Chu Xiao took his leave and left the palace. 13th brother, you may leave as well, Xianglong said. Xiang Chong nodded and quickly bowed before leaving the palace. After Xiang Chong left, Xianglong said, "Imperial advisor, what do you think of this matter? Is it correct for me to cooperate with Chu Xiao and the Yinma lineage?" In a dark corner, an old man wearing a Taoist robe walked out. The robe the old man wore was very strange. It was pitch black, and the embroidery on the back was not the yin-yang Tai Chi pattern commonly seen in Taoism. Instead, it was an evil yin-yang impermanence diagram. The black and white impermanents were intertwined at an extremely evil angle, forming the shape of a Tai Chi. The more one looked at it, the more evil it seemed. The old man in the Taoist robe had a goatee, and his eyebrows were high. He held a sword in his left hand and a horsetail whisk in his right. He stood behind Xianglong and said in a low, hoarse voice, "I see that this child is rebellious and ambitious. He is a sign of hindrance to his master. If Your Majesty wants to use this person, please be careful. Moreover, the Yinma lineage is not that simple. I have come into contact with them before. They are a group of madmen who want to revive the Kunlun devil cult. We must be very careful when cooperating with them." Xianglong did not say anything. He just laughed and said, "Hindrance to his master? Imperial advisor, you should know that there is no one under the heavens that I can't use. That Yang Gongdu was a talented man, and his ambition was no less than Chu Xiao. But in the end, with just a word from me, he had to leave the Yen kingdom with his tail between his legs. If not for the fact that he had indeed contributed to Great Yen, and some of his meritorious deeds cannot be erased, do you think he could leave the Yen kingdom alive?" Upon hearing that, the old Taoist bowed his head even lower and quickly said, "You are right, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is the Lord of Destiny. Even if Chu Xiao is the rebellious Bone's 7 murders, Your Majesty will still be able to capture him." Xianglong laughed in confusion. While walking to the back he said, "Rest assured, Imperial advisor. The reason why I'm cooperating with Chu Xiao and the Yinma lineage is just to reduce the losses that Great Yen will suffer when suppressing those forces in the martial world. Chu Xiao is a member of the Yinma lineage, and I've never been able to trust them. You, on the other hand, are my confidant." "Thank you, Your Majesty." The old Taoist bowed his head, but a strange gleam could be seen in his eyes. After leaving the Northern Yen Imperial Palace, Chu Xiu immediately returned to the Guanzhong torture room. At the moment, Wei Shuya had arrived at the Guanzhong torture room, and he had brought Zhao Chengping, Luo Sansong, and some other warriors who had followed Chu Xiu to carry out the mission of annihilation. These people were very convinced by Chu Xiu, and they were also shocked when they learned Chu Xiu's identity. This man was indeed extraordinary. It was not strange for a man to have two identities. In fact, many people from the Yinma lineage were like this. But, a man had pushed both identities to the first and second place on the Longhu list, which was a little shocking. Moreover, it was not only Luo Sansong and the others who came, but also some warriors from the phaseless demon sect that Mr. Lu had brought with him. After all, the phaseless demon sect was not Wei Shuya's subordinates, and they could only be said to be on good terms with Wei Shuya. Therefore, at this time, the phaseless demon sect had sent Mr. Lu and these warriors to give face to Wei Shuya and Chu Xiu. This was a favor that Chu Xiu had to remember. After seeing Wei Shuya, Chu Xiu told Wei Shuya the conditions that he had discussed with the Northern Yan Emperor Xianglong. After listening, Wei Shuya looked at Chu Xiu with a faint smile and said, "You act first and report later?" Chu Xiu said to Xianglong that he could represent the Yinma lineage, or at least the attitude of Wei Shuya's lineage. In the end, after getting Xianglong's reply, Chu Xiu said this to Wei Shuya. What was this if not acting first and reporting later? Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Senior Wei, don't worry about those details. I just made a verbal promise with Xianglong. If you don't agree, at worst, I won't need the support from the Northern Yan side. The deal will be invalid." Wei Shuya looked at Luo Sansong and the others, sighed and said, "I'm old, and it doesn't matter where I stay. But these young people, either because of inheritance or because of coincidence, joined the Yinma lineage and became my subordinates. I can't promote them, but I can't hold them back either. If they follow me, they will always hide in the dark and rarely make a move. If they stay for a long time, they will become useless. It's better to follow you to the Northern Yan and fight for a future." Luo Sansong and the others hurriedly bowed to Wei Shuya and said, "Thank you, Senior Wei." After they joined the Yinma lineage, they rarely made a move. Because of the Yinma lineage's rules, and because they were under Wei Shuya's command, there was not much for them to do. For these warriors in their prime, it was not time for them to cultivate in seclusion all day. Instead of hiding in the dark all day and cultivating with limited resources, it was better to follow Chu Xiu to fight in the outside world. They thanked Wei Shuya. One was to thank Wei Shuya for protecting them all these years, and the other was to thank Wei Shuya for helping them. Chapter 642. Eastern Yan, Leping County, the headquarters of the mortuary manor. Usually, there were many martial artists visiting the mortuary manor. Now that it was the day of the alliance, the number of martial artists who came to the mortuary manor was even higher. Looking at this scene, Nie Renlong couldn't help but sigh with emotion. If Dong Lu didn't die, the foundation he laid for the mortuary manor today and the momentum it created could all be passed down. How happy would Dong Lu be when he saw this scene? Losing a son in middle age was the greatest sorrow. But in the blink of an eye, Nie Renlong had already put away the sorrow in his eyes. For him, now was not the time to grieve. The mortuary manor's name would be passed down through the ages. At this time, a martial artist at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm came to Nie Renlong's side and reported, "Manor Lord, almost everyone is here." Nie Renlong waved his hand and said, "Has the Huangfu clan from the northern drifting snow city arrived?" That person shook his head and said hesitantly, "Not yet, but Manor Lord, the northern drifting snow city and the mortuary manor have long had enmity. They shouldn't be coming. As for the Huangfu clan, it would be fine if you invited them to make up the numbers, but you invited the old ancestor of the Huangfu clan. I'm afraid it will be a little difficult." Nie Renlong furrowed his brows. The fact that these two clans did not come was out of his expectations. He had guessed that these two clans would come. The northern drifting snow city did have enmity with Nie Renlong, but this matter involved the entire northern Yen pugilistic world. There was no reason for the northern drifting snow city to be absent. Even if he didn't want to increase the prestige of the mortuary manor, he had to consider his own reputation. Bai Han Tian wasn't a stupid and petty person. He had no reason not to come. As for the Huangfu clan, Nie Renlong had personally sent a letter to them, explaining the importance of their relationship. The Huangfu clan had kept a low profile for so many years. It was time for them to make their presence known. Moreover, the Huangfu clan had already promised Nie Renlong, so there was no reason for them not to keep their word. Nie Renlong frowned and said, "Let's wait for a while. One of these two clans is in the northern lands, and the other is in the western Yan country. I'm afraid there are too many people." After waiting for another 4 hours, there was still no sign of the two sects outside the morgue. Inside the morgue, there was a hubbub of voices. The people inside were probably impatient. Nie Renlong had a bad feeling in his heart, but he couldn't care less at this moment. He said, "Forget it. Let's not wait for those two. The alliance conference will begin immediately." As he spoke, Nie Renlong turned around and entered the morgue. At this moment, the morgue was filled with a hubbub of voices. Seeing Nie Renlong walk in, everyone cupped their hands towards him and said, "Manor Lord Nie." Nie Renlong flicked his sleeves and walked straight to the central high platform. He said in a deep voice, 500 years ago, the Kunlun devil cult wreaked havoc in Jianghu. The demons rose and the righteous martial arts world fell into its darkest moment. Fortunately, the sect leader of the real martial arts sect, Senior Ning Xuanji, took action and killed the devil cult leader, Dugu Weiwei. With the help of countless righteous seniors who fought to the death, the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed and the world returned to its original state. But now, the devil cult has the momentum to make a comeback. Chu Xiao has used two identities to run amok in Jianghu. He has done countless cruel and evil things. Countless people in Jianghu have died tragically in his hands. At this moment, he has even occupied the Guanzhong torture room, causing the hidden devil cult to have the momentum to make a comeback. In the past, our seniors have sacrificed their lives and shed their blood to completely suppress the devil cult. Now that it has come to our generation, how can we let them harm Jianghu again? Today, we are fortunate to have the head of the Vajra Yard of the Great Light Temple, Master Su Yan, Master Yan Huainan of the Divine Martial Sect, Sect Leader Feng Datong of the Giant Spirit Sect, and the others to come together to form an alliance. I am extremely grateful for that. At this moment, the martial arts world of Eastern Qi is also preparing to form an alliance to attack the Guanzhong torture room and destroy the evil Chu Xiao. The Northern Yan martial arts world naturally cannot be left behind. Manor Lord Nie is right. Cheers immediately came from below. Especially the martial artists who came from small forces, they were even more excited. Although most of them were actually not interested in killing the devil cult's villains, they were tempted by Nie Renlong's promise. Not to mention things like reputation, now that Chu Xiao was entrenched in the Guanzhong torture room, once the Guanzhong torture room was destroyed, half of the resources and treasures in the Guanzhong torture room would belong to them. As for the people sitting in the main seats, the Great Light Temple did not care about those miscellaneous things, and the Divine Martial Sect also cared about their reputation, so they naturally would not fight with them for those miscellaneous things. Only the Giant Spirit Sect would get a share of the things. The leader of the Giant Spirit Sect, Giant Spirit General Feng Datong, was a burly middle-aged man. Although he looked rough, he was actually very meticulous. Actually, Feng Datong did not have to come to the alliance at the Memorial Manor this time. The Giant Spirit Sect did not have any grudges with Chu Xiao, and the Giant Spirit Sect had a large number of people. They were mainly in charge of business such as escorts and transportation. They traveled between the three countries and did not belong to any country. However, in Feng Datong's view, this was an opportunity for the Giant Spirit Sect, a chance for them to make a name for themselves in the underworld. All along, the strength of the human and six gangs was relatively weak, so they were not valued by the underworld. Therefore, each gang was thinking of a strategy to develop. Among them, the World Alliance was the strongest. Chen Qingdi had used his iron fists to conquer a vast territory. Even if he was the only one left in the World Alliance, he was enough to support the entire gang. The Memorial Manor was very similar to the World Alliance. They both relied on Nie Renlong's reputation. As long as Nie Renlong did not die, the Memorial Manor would still have this reputation in the underworld. The wind-sweeping building specialized in wind intelligence, so it did not require much strength. The Zhongshan Pavilion was far away in the South China Sea. It was said that it was a gang created by a group of fallen royalty. It rarely participated in the disputes of the Central Plains warriors, so its strength was unknown. The rest of the beggar gang spread throughout the underworld. You would never know which of the seemingly sloppy beggars were real beggars and which were experts of the beggar gang. In short, the beggar gang's strength was a mystery. Not to mention the gang leader who was in seclusion. The beggar gang had never gathered for so many years. Of the 6 great gangs, the weakest one was the giant spirit gang. They didn't even have a target.
Although the giant spirit sect had a lot of people now, if something happened, the giant spirit sect would be the easiest to be removed from the list of the 6 gangs.
Therefore this time, Fang Datong did not even wait for Nie Renlong's invitation and took the initiative to join the alliance. He wanted to fight for a reputation that would bring the giant spirit sect into the category of righteous sections. Fang Datong stood up and said in a deep voice, "It's only been a few hundred years since the demonic path wreaked havoc in the underworld. We can't forget this lesson.
Although our giant spirit sect rose from the wilderness, we also know that everyone has a responsibility for the safety of the underworld. Since Villa Master Nie has gathered all of us here, then I ask Villa Master Nie to take over the position of Alliance Master.
We will naturally listen to your orders."
When Nie Renlong heard that, an imperceptible smile appeared at the corner of his lips.
Fang Datong was very sensible. He, Fang Datong, did not have the chance to take the position of alliance leader.
Therefore, pushing him to be the alliance leader now was also a form of good karma.
However, Nie Renlong still declined. There are so many famous martial Dao grandmasters and experts from the major sects here. I dare not act rashly. Su Yan said calmly, "Since Villa Master Nie was the one who suggested this alliance, you will naturally be the alliance leader. The Great Light Temple will only be in charge of taking action." Yan Huainan, on the other hand, had the intention to be the leader of this alliance. However, when he saw Fang Datong and the Temple of Great Light's empty words and their attitudes, he also knew how strong they really were. He had no choice but to say, "I have no objections to Manor Lord Nie being the leader of this alliance." Just as Nie Renlong was about to humbly decline and agree, the door to the morgue was suddenly pushed open. Nie Renlong frowned. Who was it that did not abide by the rules?
He had already ordered that when the alliance was in progress, no one was allowed to come in and disturb them. However, as the door was pushed open, a thick smell of blood rushed out. This made Nie Renlong's heart sink as he vaguely guessed something. The next moment, demon qi drifted in from outside the morgue. In an instant, dark clouds covered the sky and shrouded the entire morgue. Chu Xiao casually tossed aside the 2 corpses that had been turned into dried corpses by the great demon blood technique and said with a smile, "If you ask me, you righteous path people are all hypocrites. You want to give away the position of alliance leader. You obviously want it in your heart, but you say that you don't want it. Now, you don't have to fight anymore. I, Chu, have come to you. If you want to kill me, come." As Chu Xiao's voice fell, on the walls of the morgue, Chu Xiao's subordinates, Tangya, Luo Sansong, and the other hidden Devil Clan martial artists all leaped over the walls. They looked at the people inside the morgue with murderous intent. The demon qi in the periphery was getting stronger and stronger. This was a formation plate refined by Gongshu Yuan. It was not very useful, but it could isolate the breath and emit strong demon qi. It could suppress the opponent and enhance the strength of the user of the demon skill. In the blink of an eye, the righteous alliance that was still impassioned became the side being besieged. This caused everyone present to be unable to recover from their shock. Why did the roles suddenly turn around? Nie Renlong looked at Chu Xiao and gnashed his teeth. "Chu Xiao, how dare you take the initiative to attack?" Nie Renlong could not wait to swallow Chu Xiao alive when he saw his true enemy who killed his son. Moreover, he really did not expect Chu Xiao to choose this time to take the initiative to attack. The people he had offended in Jianghu were not only the northern Yan, but also the eastern Qi. Chu Xiao's response was either to escape or to fight back. If he took the initiative to attack, was he not afraid that the Guanzhong torture room would be destroyed by the Eastern Qi alliance? Moreover, this was the northern Yan. Where did he get the courage to come to the northern Yan and act presumptuously? Was he not afraid that the righteous sects of the northern Yan would attack and kill him? You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.